McDaniel can't move on it. Now he does. The shot, passing down. Rebound, score!
Hey, welcome to the Crease Podcast, where we talk about anything and everything to do with the NHL. I'm SJ.
WillyDubz here. Hope everyone's having a good... I think it's a Thursday for us. I've lost track of the days this week. It's been a rough week.
No, I'm like rolling out the hobo beard right now. And it's because, okay, I have a question for people about this, just like a general thing. You don't have a beard, so you can't... I don't know if you how well you can answer this. But...
Facial hair.
Okay,
no.
So I booked my appointment with my barber for this Saturday. So it's for people, it's like 3 days from now. And my general rule is like, how much, like, I try to do mine every 3 weeks generally. What's the rule on if you should do any maintenance before you go to the barber? Obviously for hair, it's different, right? You're not going to try to cut your own hair. But like, for a beard, like, should there be any maintenance done? Should you just let it grow the whole way and then go? Like, what's the rule on that is what I've always wondered.
Well, also, I have a question. When you go to the barber for that kind of stuff, right? Is there like a certain does the amount of money they charge you change, or like so for example,
dude, they're not charging. They don't charge you haircut prices, man.
Yeah, because obviously with haircuts it's different, right? Because it's like for the one I go to, this hairstylist I go to, it's $23 for male cut, right? So. You know,
do you go
doesn't
to those,
matter
like,
how much.
Asian ones? I have to...
Yes,
okay,
yes.
okay.
It's always
like.
I mean, it's the same one my mom goes to, right? So
actually costs less than my beard.
But I feel like you go get your beard trimmed more often, though, probably, right?
I go every 2 weeks, but also
yeah. Okay, so I go every 2 months. So that's I think there's a difference there.
But if you go every 2 months, wouldn't you be a little more likely to spend more?
What do you mean?
Like,
no,
because it's
it's
more like if
no,
it's
a
like,
flat
would you
rate.
be more like? No, I mean, wouldn't you like go to maybe a more higher end place because you go less, or is that just not?
I don't know. I mean, it's $23. It's just I get the same haircut every time. It's the Asian, just cut the sides and then cut
person
the front.
Doesn't speak English. You just point at the chart or whatever.
No, it's actually funny. They actually do speak English.
Oh, okay.
So it's actually one of those that actually speaks English. So it's weird. I don't know.
The thing too with like beard like barbers, I think, is there's also a certain relationship you have. Like, for me, honestly, I'll say this, like, my barber does a good job, no complaints, but it's also like there's a vibe and a chemistry that's like established. It's almost like a relationship, literally. Like, I've had the same barber, I think, for about almost 5 years now, and it's really easy. Just book it through whatever system. Half the time we're there, like, he's trimming my beard and we're just talking about random stuff. And like, before I know it, 30, 40 minutes have gone by and that's like the day. And it's one of those things where I don't like deviating from it unless it's like he's on vacation and it's an absolute emergency. So it's one of those things where I don't know. It's just, there's that relationship there and I don't mess with it. It's good. It works. What it is.
Isn't there that saying where it's like if it ain't broke, like, don't fix it? I mean, isn't that kind of?
Have you ever also see the clips of people like going to a different barber? It's like this whole thing. But no, yeah, honestly, that's what it is. It's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Also, there's like a chemistry. Like, I don't know how to explain it. I don't like someone just. There has to be a bit of conversation. You know what I'm saying? There has to be a bit of lube before you stick it in, kind of thing, right? Like, that's just what it has to be. Like, there has to be a bit of conversation. There has to be a chemistry there. It can't just be us sitting in silence while you do it. That's just my thing. You know what I mean?
I mean, that makes sense. I don't know. At least for me, like, when I get my haircuts, it's just total silence. But
no.
I don't really care. It's like 20 minutes, I'm done, kind of thing. So it doesn't really matter to me.
Well, also it works because like me and my barber, Brendan, we're in the same age demographic, so we talk about a lot of like common stuff. Like, we'll talk about dating, we'll talk about sports, we'll talk about like clothing, hobbies, stuff like that. So
fair. Okay.
It functionally works. I'm just wondering like what the rule is on like if you let your beard, like with beards, if somebody could answer this, like, do you even trim like some of the maintenance sides, or do you just let it go until your barber comes? Because I don't do a full amount with it because I don't want to like mess it up and then go, or like trim it down too low to where you can't do anything. I've just paid 25 whatever for no reason, plus tip for no reason. So like, but then sometimes you let it go too long and you're in this weird point where like it just borderline feels uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I was gonna say I don't know what you mean because I don't have a beard, but I don't know if anyone in the comments can relate and give our boy SJ here a little bit of
Like
tips.
honestly,
Then.
like I've just been debating it because it's like it's grown and like I'm okay with it to an extent, but sometimes I'll admit like I accidentally like rested my head on my arm like for a second. I'm like, that feels a little pricklier than it should. You know what I mean?
I didn't even know that was a thing, honestly. As a guy who doesn't have a beard, I did not even know that was a thing.
Okay, can I say this? I've never met an Asian person with like a full beard ever. Like I've seen like the mustache, the dirty mustache. Like I've seen like the little like chin hairs. I don't think I've ever met one that had like a full on lumberjack beard.
Well, I've never met like a pure, like not pure Asian, but like a you know what I mean? Like it's the Asian guys that I have met that have a beard are like half Asian. So it's like
that's true. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, like it's kind of interesting. It's like you guys got all the hair on the head, and like none of it just comes to your body or works out.
Personally, I don't mind that. Honestly,
it's a way better deal. Trust me, as a brown guy, man, like the body hair, it's miserable sometimes for sure. All right, moving on to the hockey topics for this week. So there's a couple things we're going to talk about today. We're just going to talk about some of the news because we're near the trade deadline. We're basically a day away, and all the rumors and all the trades are like hitting fast and furious. Basically, it's just like trying to dodging the matrix right now with all the rumors, trades, all the transactions that are going on. And then because there's like 20-something games left before going into the playoffs, we're just going to do our tier list of all the teams currently and where we see them. Obviously, that can change if like some major trade happens, but just where they're at right now.
Yep, let's go. I'm ready. You in?
All right. So the first, I think the biggest trade that's probably happened during this week or during the last 2 weeks was the Seth Jones trade. So, WillyDubz, do you want to fill them in on what the full trade was?
All right, I'm just going to pull it up again because I don't actually have it fully written down. But, okay, here we go. News, cap down. Yep, here's the trade. Okay, I'll pull it up from Dauber Hockey because it's a little bit easier that way. So, the Seth Jones trade, I believe the Florida Panthers have acquired Seth Jones and a 2026 fourth-round pick, which is Chicago's fourth-round pick. And in exchange, the Blackhawks are getting Spencer Knight, a 2026 first-round pick from Florida, and the pick has conditions where it slides to a 2027 first-round pick if Florida trades their 2026 first-round pick elsewhere.
We're getting into the NBA. We're getting into the NBA levels with like weird conditions now. Like,
man, that's the weirdest condition. Doesn't that sound kind of odd? Because it's like basically you're saying, "Oh, you'll get the first-round pick, but if we use it in another trade, yeah, we'll give you the other." I don't know. I think that's kind of stupid. That's even stupider than some of the other conditions I've seen on trades. But anyways.
Well, I remember reading, man, I just hope they remove, my hot take on conditionals and protections. Like, I don't think there should be any. Like, I've always been, but that just sounds weird. Remember that, like, there was one NBA pick I think I sent you one time where just trying to read it broke my brain. And I hope we don't get to that point with the picks. But we'll just say, yeah, it's a 2026 conditional first. Like, just leave it at that. If it conveys, who knows? We'll see. My initial take on this trade, I don't know if you agree. I think it was a good trade for both teams.
So for me, it's a little interesting because I think it's a fine trade for Florida. I like it a little bit more for the Blackhawks because I think the Blackhawks, especially I think their GM, Davidson, he inherited Seth Jones, I think. So it's not like he paid this guy. So he was trying to find a way to get out of it. He did have to use a little bit of retention. I think he's retained, I believe, $2.5 million for the remaining. I forget how many years are remaining, but it's about 5 to 7 years roughly.
It's a while.
It's a lot, yeah. I think it's fine.
He's on that Darnell Nurse package.
Exactly, but I think it's fine because assuming the Canada-U.S. relations don't mess with the cap situation, if the cap continues to go up, I think that $2.5 million is kind of negligible, so that's fine. And I actually like it for Chicago just because, hey, getting Spencer Knight, you don't really have a goalie of the future right now, and maybe Knight, after his battles with OCD, and he's been pretty good this year, so maybe he, finds his rhythm. He becomes that goalie in Chicago that they need him to be. So I think it's a good trade for both teams overall. And I hate to say this for Florida. Look, if Bobrovsky gets hurt and you're down to Vitek Vanacek, you're probably screwed anyways. Well, it would be nice to have Knight in the situation. I think you have to bolster your D, and their problem was they didn't really have I'm going to say like a power play specialist kind of. That was kind of their
didn't,
struggle because
no.
Ekblad
They've rotated.
wasn't really doing that role. Yeah. So who have they tried? They tried Boquist. They've tried Boquist. They've tried, I think, what's his name?
They've
Uvis,
rotated 5 guys at one point, which is actually crazy. So they've rotated Boquist, Uvis, my boy Uvis, Nate Schmidt, Aaron Ekblad, and Forsling, I think, at one point to start the year. So it's literally been 5 defensemen. So
I think that's low-key their only weakness, right? No power play specialist. I think they have everything else. The team is literally loaded.
No. Yeah, that's the way I kind of felt with this. Like, I think Kyle Davidson hit out of the park. Like you mentioned, I swear, I feel like when he became GM, the first thing he saw was a Seth Jones contract, and he was probably like, fuck Stan Bowman. That would have been my first thought the minute I saw that contract, because you have $9.5 million for a guy who's not a number 1 defenseman, and for that term, you're like, how? I feel like his first job once he got Bedard was like, how the hell do I get rid of this contract? Yeah, like Jones was miscast as a number 1 D-man on the Blackhawks. So like, let's face reality, he was playing pretty meh defensively too, and he seemed like he wanted out. Not to mention, if you look at like the Blackhawks prospects, all their strength is on defense right now, oddly enough, for the most part. Like, they have young defensemen like Vlasic, Levshunov, and Korchinski who could use time and development and kind of fit the timeline for the Blackhawks a bit better than Seth Jones does. And also, like you said, you get another draft pick that can be either used in a trade for another player, you can make the pick yourself, and you get to take a chance on a former high pedigree prospect in Spencer Knight. Spencer Knight was one of the highest Spencer Knight was one of the highest drafted goalies in the lottery era, right? So like there's obviously pedigree with this guy. And Mrazek and Brossoit aren't really there long term. Soderblom just kind of seems like a guy. So for me, it's like you get rid of probably the biggest albatross on your cap sheet. You get another draft pick, and you get a guy who like has the potential to be really good. And now that guy gets his chance to play more games and prove to you that maybe he's worth something, right?
I was gonna say too, because the Seth Jones contract was, I think it was low-key the only bad contract the Blackhawks had. Like, I'm going through their cap situation right now. A lot of their guys.
I will say I don't like the Teravainen one, but yeah, like it's in terms of like red flag contract.
You can deal with it. You can deal with the Teravainen one. Yeah. So I'm fine with the Teravainen one. Plus, he comes off the books when he's 33, so it's not even it's not even one of those situations where he's stuck there till he's like 37 and he's declining, and it just contract gets worse and worse. I don't think the contract can get any worse than it is right now unless he somehow just loses all sense of scoring touch. But yeah, I mean, their contract situation is pretty good overall. They're going to keep the $2.5 million. I think they're setting the record for the most retained salary in a trade. A little bit unfortunate, but I think with 2.5 per year, it's kind of negligible, right?
Honestly, so. I can't even hate on Davidson for it because, again, he inherited it, right? Like, Stan Bowman made a bunch of bad moves before he left. So, like, what can you do, right? It is what it is. You know what I mean? And for the Panthers, I mean, so it's weird because Spencer Knight and the 2026 first, barring injury, don't really affect the Panthers' plans in the near future. And this is kind of a win now team. It's weird. I hate to say this because it just seems like a lazy answer for everything. But like the first thing that I thought when they made this trade, as skeptical as I was Bill Zito doesn't miss. It was like just flashing. So I'm like, part of me doesn't want to just use that fallacy of appeal to authority. But like if Bill Zito made this trade, there's probably a good reason for it somewhere. You know what I mean? If you look at the cap numbers for the Panthers, that's where this gets interesting. So both Knight and Bob combined cost the Panthers $14.5 million against a salary cap, right? And they weren't getting rid of Bob because Bob's the incumbent with playoff experience. Getting rid of Spencer Knight and having Dreger or Vanacek or whoever, basically the league minimum, allows the Panthers to address other needs on the team in the future. Like, for example, Aaron Ekblad's going to be a UFA this year, and there's a real discussion on what he's going to be worth, right? I mean, and there's other conversations to be had on the roster. I'm not the biggest Seth Jones fan. Again, I think he's miscast as a number 1 D-man, but if he's going to succeed in an environment, this would be the best one, because depending on whether he gets paired with Mikkola or Forsling, they'll provide him with the most capable defensive partner he's had in a while. And he can provide a point shot that's badly needed on this team right now. And like you said before, the potential for power play 1 stability that they just haven't had at that D pairing spot this entire year. I do agree, like, I hate getting rid of Knight, but again, when we talk about inheriting players, Bill Zito didn't
they have to
draft
go
him.
for it. They have to go for it.
Yeah,
I think.
and also Bill Zito didn't draft him, so there's not that like relationship there. And here's the thing: as much as people don't want to admit it, when new GMs come in, they don't have a relationship to the old regime. That's why you see coaches sometimes get fired and then they bring in their new guy. It's kind of the same with players. Like Bill Zito didn't draft Spencer Knight. He doesn't have that same affinity for maybe that he would for like an Anton Lundell or a Maki Samasevich or something like that. So I understand it from his perspective. And also, the thing with the Panthers is like, and you'll see this with the Lightning as well, is teams in that contention window generally are starting to use their first round picks more in other unique, creative fashions. And I think this is one of them, right? Like the Panthers' last first round pick was Maki Samasevich, I believe. That's actually playing on the roster, and Lundell, who were both been, like for where they picked them, A+ level, I would say. And it's one of those things where I don't mind them even trading the pick, because I think when you think about it, you have this pick, it might take 3-4 years for them to actually be a contributor. And it's going to be a late first anyway, so I'm fine with it.
Also, you need to win now too, because this. I hate to say this, but this is the team that won the cup last year. Like, this is a cup capable roster. Obviously, you lost a few pieces such as Montour last year, but you kind of replaced him, quote unquote, with Seth Jones, who I'm gonna say I feel like this is his first, like his last capable defensive partner.
Like, yeah,
I would say his last defensive partner who was good was probably Zach Werenski, right? I'm assuming that's the last good D.
Well, I mean, like a defensive. Werenski's Werenski's really good, but it's obviously more on the offensive end and the ability to play drive. Forsling and Mikkola are good. Like Forsling's an eraser at certain points, and Mikkola's really good too defensively. But again, it kind of offsets because they need that. Those two guys kind of need more of a point shot, point presence, a kind of a more offensive guy, and I think Jones fits. Again, if there's a spot he's going to go to, this would probably be one of the best spots for him to fit in, right?
Yeah, and I think although at $7 million, it's a little bit tough. But I think if you're Florida, you knew you kind of had to go for it. You needed that power play kind of specialist kind of defenseman. And while it is a hefty price, I don't really see anybody else on the market you could have gotten. I'm trying to think of names off the top of my head, but I can't actually think of anybody that you could get for a decent price.
I'll always throw like a Vince Dunn name, but like it is for how little they gave up. Like I know Knight's a fair bit, but like in terms of what you would have had to give up to get like a Dunn, a Dobson level talent, I think this is.
Also, I don't know how much this matters for a lot of teams, but I think a lot of teams like to balance their right-handed defenseman and left-handed defenseman, right? Because I think the Florida Panthers have mostly left-handed defensemen. I guess Jones being right-handed, I don't know how much that actually matters, but
it did.
I guess you have got
a lot. Yeah.
I think guys not playing their offside is kind of important, because I remember watching at the Four Nations Cup. I think Werenski having to play on his offside actually kind of caused. I don't know if you saw in the Canada game, it actually caused him a bit of issues. So I feel like if you're Florida, you probably had that in the back of your mind when you were looking for a defenseman.
Well, and also when you trade for a guy, you kind of want to make his transition as easy as possible. Making him switch after playing, like almost 60 games with one hand just doesn't seem to be logical. But
yeah.
But I don't know, overall, like I think it's fine for both teams. And again, both teams, like you can have trades that are good for both teams because both teams are just at drastically different points in their contention window, right? The Blackhawks hasn't begun. The Panthers just made 2 cup finals in a row, and honestly, like if you look at the East right now, them and Tampa are probably the favorites for like Florida could make it a third time to the finals, right? And so you got to go.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny too because I think the last time we had a team make it 3 times to the finals, probably Tampa, right? Same division, Atlantic. I think it was the same.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, man,
it's kind of crazy.
Florida on the come up. Florida.
It's kind of crazy. The Atlantic's just been producing good team after good team after good team.
All they need to do is get a Miami Vice like Florida Panther style jersey, and yeah, that's it.
Oh, is it like the South Beach colors, the pink and the pink and the?
They need to do one. I'm saying that since the beginning.
I feel like if they did one, you know that meme, like I think it's the Fry meme from a Futurama. It's like "Shut up and take my money."
Yeah,
I feel like that would be you in a nutshell. Shut up and take my money.
Had the throwback Panther in South Beach colors. Game over. Like to me, the Caps have like the best jersey. Like Caps have been coming out with just amazing jerseys, but that South Beach one would be the best one in the league, I think.
What Trump? Your Trump the cap one? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the next trade here. So Tampa Bay and Seattle made a trade. People are kind of weirdly not super high on this for Tampa. I really like it.
I think if I'm a Tampa fan, I'm fine with it because the reality of the situation is this: you have your core forwards in Point and Kucherov locked up, and I hate to say this, but the thing that's been lacking with your team is your depth scoring. You lost quite a few number of pieces throughout the years just because you had to pay your main guys, right? And I think getting Bjorkstrand and getting Yanni Gord back, I think people forget how important it is to when you're making a trade to get a guy that's played in your system before. Because a guy like Yanni Gord, once played for Tampa, he's probably familiar with the system. He'll probably adjust a little bit easier than Bjorkstrand. And I think that actually matters quite a bit because you don't want players taking too much time to adjust to a new system. So I think that plays a little bit of a role there. They had a hole in their third line, which Yanni Gord fills perfectly. And then on their second line, they lacked a little bit of scoring on that second line apart from Cirelli. And I think they didn't really want Paul as their quote unquote second line winger, so they can move him down to the third line now, and you can slot Bjorkstrand in on that second line, and I think that's fine. And if I'm Seattle, I mean, this is probably the best offer you probably could have gotten. Just a bunch of first. You're not good enough to try to contend or to even try to make the playoffs, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So you just need the picks to rebuild. You have some decent young guys. Shane Wright's looked pretty good as of late. You hope maybe Beniers kind of puts it together and figures it out. But you pick up a few more picks to kind of help. I don't want to say accelerate the rebuild, but to help with the rebuild, right? So I think it's a good trade for both teams overall. I'm actually fine with it. Looking at it from both sides.
I think if you're Tampa, they're kind of in the same window as Florida, except their window's even their vets are older than Florida's, right? So this is a win now team, right? There's no these first round picks. When are they going to contribute, right? And right now, if you're Tampa, with the way Vasilevsky's playing, you're in contention for best team in the East, and this trade makes them deeper. I don't even mind the cost of the first round picks because if you ever look at Tampa, they're one of those teams. So there's different ways teams build. I think Dallas is the outlier exception where, for example, as a Stars fan, they use all their first round picks and those guys end up being contributors, but that's really rare. Detroit, to a lesser extent, does that too. If you look at a lot of Detroit's best players like Seider, Edvinsson, Larkin, Raymond, all their first round picks become contributors kind of thing. A lot of teams don't do that, or maybe they do that at one point and deviate from it. But look at for example, the Brandon Hagel acquisition, right? They trade for a guy on his ELC, they give up a first round pick, and then they sign that guy to a below market deal, which ends up being a steal. They haven't had a first round pick play meaningful time on the ice since Vasilevsky. I mean, the guys who haven't been accused of sexual assault withstanding, right? So, outside of Vasilevsky and Cal Foote, their first round picks haven't really been, played meaningful roles. So I think it's fine for them. How much I love Oliver Bjorkstrand. I think he's just a really flexible winger. You can play anywhere from the top line and third line. Tampa can also use him on PP1 because they've been struggling to fill that last slot on PP1.
Yeah, they don't have that ever since Stamkos left. They don't have that right-handed one-timer on the power play, right? And I think Bjorkstrand actually has a pretty good shot from what I remember. So he could probably fill that role. I don't know who you take off the power play. It's a little bit tricky. Probably, I hate to say this, it'd probably be Hagel realistically. But
I think he's someone that could fit there, and he fits. Honestly, he can fit on the first line, second line, or third line. Because if you've ever seen Seattle's blender of lines, he's literally played everywhere on Seattle's roster. Like you said, Gord's just a good third line center that goes back to familiar system. All of a sudden, too, look at Tampa's center depth going into the playoffs. Point Cirelli Gord is a really good group down the middle in terms of both two-way play and scoring, which I really like. And again, against Florida, you need three lines like that. You need three centers like that because Florida is going to challenge you up the middle. Toronto to a lesser extent, but Florida, if you think you're going to play Florida, they'll definitely challenge you with that as well. For Seattle, I do like this because I think what Seattle did was they signed Montour in the offseason, and they kind of looked at it like, okay, we're going to see what this roster looks like, right, coming into the season. Because they had the one expansion year, one good year, and then the one bad year kind of thing. And I think they finally acknowledged watching this team this year that this team as constructed just isn't it. And I think they're going to pivot to a rebuilding approach, and it's needed on this roster. And they can start acquiring assets for shorter term players. Like, I think what Seattle should honestly start doing is moving off assets, try to find a Jones-like deal for Montour, and focus on the guys like you mentioned, like Beniers, like Kako, like Shane Wright, like Riker Evans, guys like that, and start to kind of build the next iteration of what this team should be. Because they tried with more. If you look at their team right now, it's low-key one of the older teams in the league, which is kind of sad. But I think it's one of those things where you start to pivot more into a rebuild and like what normal expansion teams do.
I think this team, Seattle as a whole, just feels kind of weird because they do have some like the Montour contract kind of feels weird on a team that's trying to rebuild. But I think
remind me of
like
the
you
Coyotes, but when John Chayka was there, they felt like a first line center, like an elite first line center away. But the problem is that's the hardest thing to get, right?
Well, I was gonna say at least they have a few guys that could you'd hope maybe could fill that role. Beniers and Wright. There's at least prospects there you could try to fill it. Whereas I think with the Arizona situation, it just kind of felt weird because they didn't really have anyone that could fill that role, right? I remember in that Chayka days, they just couldn't find someone to do that. Like they tried Keller up the middle for a little bit before they moved him to the wing, right? So, but if I'm Seattle, I mean, it's full rebuild.
I think they have to. I just like they tried. They gave it a try. Hey, I mean, they took Dallas to a Game 7 and beat Colorado 1 year in the playoffs. But I think you kind of have to go the traditional expansion route. And again, like I said, like try to find maybe a Jones-like deal for Montour, or maybe you retain a bit and move him. Again, trade off guys like Jaden Schwartz, Jared McCann. Like we talked about this earlier, guys like that, and kind of pivot to what the next iteration of this team is going to be.
And I think with those guys you mentioned, such as Schwartz or like Schwartz mainly for that, he has 2 years left on his contract, right? So you can maybe retain for these two coming years, and you can actually get even better assets coming back, right? Because I think with a lot of those players that you usually trade that are on expiring deals, you don't get the kind of assets you get back aren't necessarily as good. You maybe get a second, a third. If you retain some cap, maybe you can squeeze the first. But on a player such as Schwartz, who's had a pretty good season, right? 2 years left on his deal this year and next year. If you retain some cap, I don't know how many retention slots they have left, but if you use one on him, for example,
depending on the roster, though, guys like McCann, Larson, I think can be worth the first to the right team. I think there are a lot of teams that could.
Well, I was gonna say McCann. I feel like McCann is definitely worth the first to the right team as well.
100%.
So there's a few guys you could definitely squeeze a first out of, and then I hate to say this, but you could definitely send Vince Dunn packing, and you definitely get a good haul for that. But the question is who would take him, or who would have the cap space to take him?
And the assets. His cap's not bad. It's the assets. Yeah. All right. Moving on to the next one. This is the one I don't get. I don't know why this happened. It's the Michael Bunting trade. I just don't understand this deal unless there's a second move coming. Like, unless Erik Karlsson or Shen is getting flipped. I just, like, why?
You know what? The only thing I got out of it is that between Luke Shen and Thomas Novak, they both make I think they both make 6.2 million, like combined for the next 2 years. So
okay, I was gonna be like, wait.
So I think the logic is if you're Nashville and you're still desperately trying to go for it, is you trade for a guy in Bunting who makes 1.7 million less than both those two people combined, and you kind of save 1.7 million, right? It makes a little bit more sense for Nashville because they're saving a bit of money, and I actually think Bunting's the better player out of all those guys in the deal.
Yes,
Bunting's
best player, but like, what is Nashville doing? I don't understand. Like, I don't think Novak I don't know what Novak really is, but like Nashville just seems to continue digging themselves. Like, Nashville's easily the worst situation in the league. Now they're just digging this hole further. Like, can you name a young player left on Nashville right now?
I'm trying to think off. I think Tomasino's not there anymore.
Parsonen's not there. Novak's not there anymore. Tomasino's not there. Askarov's gone. Like, can somebody name one? Like,
what's that guy's name? Remember the one who had when he got drafted, his name got sign language? That guy? That's the only one I can think of.
Wasn't he drafted by the Sharks?
I'm pretty sure he's on Nashville now. He's the one. I think he's there. He's with the Preds now.
But my point is, this is my point, right? Like, this team is second to last, third last in the league with no good young pieces right now, and somehow they're just making trades for more win now guys. Like I just don't get it from Nashville side, and like Pittsburgh just seems to be rebuilding, which is fine. And for me, either they like Novak more than other teams, or he's just like a try it out piece, or there's another trade coming, because otherwise I don't really get it for them either.
Well, I was gonna say the trade makes no sense for both teams, but I can at least understand it more from the Nashville perspective. At least you're saving.
I understand it more for Pittsburgh.
Really? Because I just see it as you're saving money. You're saving a little bit of money that you might be able to use. You might be able to throw at somebody else and regret it later. That's the way I see it.
Maybe they like Novak and want to give him a try. I don't know. Did Novak play for the Sioux? That's another thing we have to check. Because if he played for the Sioux, it's possible.
Okay, I'm actually going to check, but I feel like with most of the European guys, that's not usually the case. Although maybe I could be wrong. Oh no, he's American. What the heck? That name sounds. I don't know. I thought Novak sounded. I'm not gonna lie. I thought that was a Czech name, low key. But
I thought Novak was younger than he was. He's 27. So okay, then I really don't know. But I'll say this: the real winner in this trade is Luke Shen. Do you know why?
Honestly, you just throw the answer out there. I can't guess anything.
Because he gets to go to a team that scores goals, and that's what Luke Shen wants. That's what Luke.
Yeah, I was actually looking at Novak's stats as a whole. 43 points in 51 games 2 years ago. Not bad. 45 and 71 last year. Meh. 22 and 52. Yeah, okay. Sounds like he's on the decline. I don't know. Yeah.
And he's a center. Like, I don't know. I just don't understand this trade unless there's a second move coming. That'd be my only logical thing. And then I think the last trade to kind of talk about is just the Gustav Nyquist trade. This one, pretty simple. Like, the Preds are trading... this is what I don't get about this. So the Preds were trading Nyquist for whatever... they're trading whatever assets they can to get picks, but then they trade for Bunting.
I genuinely think the Bunting thing is just to save a little bit of money. That's it. I think that's the only logic I can see that trade. Nyquist, they're just trying to get rid of an asset on an expiring contract, right? So
I hope so. And then the Wild badly need depth right now because they look horrible without Kaprizov. And
Kaprizov's not coming back for a while too. So
like just adding any depth you can to the roster just helps. That's really all I have on that one.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't really have. No, yeah. Honestly, I don't have much else to add. There's a couple of trades maybe we'll talk about in the next video because we had a couple that kind of popped up later, like earlier today that we
don't even know what the full deal is.
We don't even know the full context of it, or it's a little bit. We popped a little bit too late for us to put our a good 2 cents in from each of us. So we'll probably talk a bit more about those.
Did want to talk about before we go into the power rankings is so there's been a lot of news about Rantanen not willing to sign an extension yet, and Carolina debating trading him or moving him. I just kind of wanted we've talked about it a little bit. I just wanted your opinion on it. Like, what's your
look? If I'm Carolina, I'm not moving Rantanen because I hate to say this, but if you move Rantanen, what assets are you going to get back that will help you for this year or at least help you in the future? Right? I just don't see a path for that. And also, teams kind of already know that Rantanen's not willing to sign an extension with you right now, right? So you don't even have, I don't even want to say you don't have the leverage in trade negotiations, but the other teams have the leverage because they know that you're in an uncomfortable situation with Rantanen and you're not going to get the assets you want back. And I hate to say this, but you already traded Nachas. You kind of move the can forward instead of kicking it down the road, right? You might as well just fully commit and just say, look, go for it. Because realistically, you're not getting a better player if you trade Rantanen. There's not a better player to get out there for him.
So
that's someone who was willing to trade you, at least.
Well, also the thing with Rantanen that's interesting is if you look at his numbers, the production hasn't been there, but if you look at his advanced stats, he's actually been pretty good. He's just been horribly unlucky. I think he's shooting close to 4% right now, and his career shooting percentage is 16, right?
So at some point, you expect it to bounce back.
Yeah,
you hope it bounces back.
Yeah, his Corsi 4 percentage was around 70, and his PDO is 92. And I know people go advanced stats, whatever, but it just all lays to this idea that he's been incredibly unlucky so far. And if you watch the games too, it kind of bears this out because he's been arguably their best player as a forward. It just hasn't been going his way. And there's going to be teams that look at that and be like, hey, like it's going to regress to the mean at some point. But yeah, if I'm Carolina, absolutely not. I'm not trading him for a couple reasons. One, look, perception isn't reality. But if Gensel's gone and you trade Rantanen after these initial early struggles, there's going to be this perception that like star players just can't play in Carolina. And fair or not, it's going to be a perception that might stick, right? Like you can't.
It's one you don't want with this. It's one you don't want with this team because you're going to have trouble signing guys. That's going to be an issue with that too.
And then the other thing too is like, okay, cool, you trade him, right? Well, what's your plan this year? Like, what's your plan this year? Just to lose in the second round again? Like, you're already...
I was going to say losing the first round might even be a possibility, low-key, with the way things are going with this team.
Though. But, it's just one of those things I wouldn't understand the point of doing it. It's interesting, too. The other aspect that makes this trade complicated is you're not trading a star player for, like, picks. Like, Carolina doesn't need picks, right? What they need are players that can help them win now. So all the teams that we talked about that can maybe help them win now aren't like either don't have the like a team like Florida who's been rumored. I don't know if they have the capital to make it work. And then a team like Dallas, I don't know if they have the cap situation to make it work. So then now you're looking at teams like
I was gonna say same thing with Toronto too.
Yeah,
don't
Toronto
have the cap
doesn't have the cap to make it work. So now you're looking at teams like kind of Detroit and Columbus, and it's like, how much are they willing to give you for what's basically, and that's what this is. It's basically a rental. It's 20 games and the playoffs. It's basically the playoffs. Let's be real here. He's going to need like another 12 games to acclimate, and then it's playoffs. And
also, if I'm Columbus, low key, like I wouldn't even want to give up the assets for him now because look, you
could just sign him.
You can just sign him in the offseason. Yeah, you can throw him all the money in the offseason and be like, here, we'll throw you $15 million. Do you want to take it?
Yeah.
And obviously, if Rantanen doesn't take it, then that's not
same
their
with
fault,
Detroit.
Right? Just wait.
Like all these teams,
I know he'd be nice. He'd be nice to have for a playoff push because I hate to say this with Columbus and Detroit, they are. I think they are at least holding or like right on the outside of wildcard spots. Exactly. So it's like it'd be nice to have him for the push. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to deny that. The reality is though, if you don't make the playoffs this year, it's not the end of the world for either team. Well, actually, maybe a bit more for Detroit than Columbus, but for Columbus, it's not the end of the world.
It's like you add Rantanen, it kind of feels like a bit putting the cart before the horse because I don't think the rest of the roster is ready. But the problem is like those are the only teams that I think make sense because they have the cap space. They have like a combination of like maybe picks and players you would want. Like, you could probably get a first from Columbus and like a decent roster player, like maybe like a Sillinger. I'm not saying for sure, like don't quote me, but like a Sillinger or Johnson might not be bad, right? Or like Detroit, for example, has like 3 quality defensive prospects. Like they have a couple quality defensive players you can like get in a trade and stuff like that. Like there's moves to be made with those guys, but it's like I don't know if they give that all up or give whatever up just to maybe make a more competitive first round kind of thing. And then like I said, like Florida, Dallas, teams like that, the Leafs, the Rangers, either it's a combination of picks, cap space, or assets that they just don't have available, right? So it's like you kind of have to keep him and make it work. And like honestly, regression to the mean tells you it will. It's just right now, like I feel so down on Carolina's depth right now. It's like kind of I don't know.
Well, they don't really have depth. That's the problem. Not just down on it, there is no depth.
Yeah, overall, like I don't think you trade Rantanen. I think you just honestly, if you have to make this work. That's it. Because if this doesn't work and Rantanen leaves, that's 2 years in a row you've had a marquee player leave in free agency. And again, starts to feed the perception that like elite players can't play in this system. And that's not a perception you want to have.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree with you. You can't ship off a player of this caliber just because they're struggling. And also, you already committed I hate to say this, but I don't want to say it's a sunken cost fallacy, but like you committed so much to get it because you kicked the can on, like you just said, screw an HS and you moved him when he was having, I would say, his career year, right? So you've already kind of sacrificed that. What are you going to get back that'll actually help you right now? And you don't want anything that helps you for the future because there's not. Let's be honest. There's
only
nothing.
Trade that makes sense, and I don't even. There's 2 trades that make sense, and I don't even know if either team.
Columbus.
No, Florida. If Verhaeghe plus something, I could see. But it's like, why? Like,
if I'm Florida, why?
Yeah.
I hate to say this, if you're in Florida, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Verhaeghe's been good.
Also, like, why trade a guy under contract for multiple years for a guy who you probably can't pay in free agency, right?
Yeah.
And then also, like, that, and again, I think Columbus makes a lot of sense. Like, there's a trade somewhere for either Sillinger or Johnson, plus a first, plus, like, maybe a lower prospect. But again, if you're Columbus, like, you struggle to get to the cap. Like, you could just literally, in the offseason, throw the Johnny Gaudreau contract, rest in peace, at Mikko Rantanen. That same offer. Literally.
Well, I was also going to say, too, the Blue Jackets actually have enough like high-end prospects who they could even throw if they really, really desperately want Rantanen.
But there's
now.
no point.
Like, there's no point. But I'm saying, like, if you want to throw a Caden Lindstrom in there, Denton Mateychuk, and you have a lot of things you could just throw at.
But that means they could
Carolina.
also throw guys off the rest. Like, you could give up Kent Johnson if you're high on one of those guys coming in, right? So it's like...
Exactly, yeah. But I mean, if you don't want to give up a current roster player, that's also another approach you can take. Although I don't know if Carolina would be too happy to go for the prospects. That's the thing.
Right. That's what I mean. It's such a weird trade because it's if they were to trade him, they're a team that's contending, so picks and assets don't work, like I said before. So you want current players, but you have to trade him to a contending team that's okay with him being a rental. So it's like, how does that? I don't got much. I don't see it as a situation. If something happens, I'd be on that front. I'd be stunned.
Well, I was also going to say too, like I think he played tonight's game, so I don't think it looks like he's probably not going anywhere. Because usually, if you're planning to trade a guy, you probably take him out of the lineup.
Yeah, there's so many guys that have been sitting recently. I think, although I think the Isles played Brock Nelson, even though he's in trade talk. So like, who knows?
It's weird because they played Brock Nelson, and then there was a tweet I saw that said they weren't trading him. Then I saw another tweet a couple hours later. They are trading exactly. So I don't know what's going on with that. That one's just way too hard to judge.
Yeah. It's the
I don't know what's going on.
Leave it at that.
Yeah.
All right. Any other talks on the trades you wanted to discuss, or is that?
Probably not for now. We'll probably talk a bit more about some of the trades in the next episode because there's going to be a few more that happen. For those who don't know, recording on the Thursday night. The deadline's tomorrow at 3 p.m., so there's probably going to be a bunch of trades we'll talk about next week.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to our power rankings. So I kind of felt like this was a good time to do this because there's 20 games left going into the playoffs. Now, obviously, some of this might change if like somebody swings a massive move at a trade deadline. But for now, I think right now is like the best time to kind of do this because it's kind of like almost a going into the playoff primer in a way and going into like contention for these spots. Because I think outside of Washington and the Metro, all these spots are low key up for grabs. Like Winnipeg jumped out to a lead, but there's an outside chance Dallas can catch them.
Well, I was gonna say that I think they're one of the few teams that actually like. I looked at the other teams. The Pacific, there's nobody in the Pacific that can really catch them in terms of best team in the West, right? And I think there's only one team in the Central that can actually catch
Dallas.
Yeah, Dallas. So,
but like I think Washington's the only one. Washington's the only one that's like super.
Who feels like they have the division locked up? Yeah, the division's locked up. Yeah.
All right, so load up the power rankings, WillyDubz, and we'll get cracking.
Yep. I don't know if you guys can see it. Hopefully, you guys can see it.
All right, so we have a lot of tiers here. Apparently, TD Insurance is talking to us too, so that's fun. But
the ads.
So we have a couple tiers here. We're gonna start at the bottom with what I like to call, for people who follow other sports, trust the process. These are the clear rebuilding teams. These are the multiple year rebuild, and we expect it. And right now, they're just in that process. So the first team I want to put here is the Flyers. It's funny because they are a Philly team themselves. Do we not have the Flyers logo?
I thought we had the logo on here, but I'm low key like, oh no, there it is. It's on the right. I'm just blind.
So
I'm blind.
It's funny because this is named after another Philly team, the Sixers, and we have the Flyers. Here.
I just realized
the Flyers kind of realized I think after the Carter Hart thing and last year, they kind of slowly realized in the offseason and acquiring Michkov that they're a rebuilding team. They're apparently trying to trade Scott Lawton for stark raving mad teams who think Scott Lawton's a really good player for some reason.
Apparently there's a bidding war on Scott Lawton. That's what I've heard on Twitter. So apparently there's a bidding war for him. So
they're kind of featuring Rasmus Ristolainen to hope to make a team bite on him. And I think other guys are available. Like I think Cates is available. They traded Morgan Frost already, if I remember correctly.
Yep,
So
Frost is
they're
gone.
in
Farabee's
that,
gone too. So
yeah, they're in that rebuilding stage. The other team I'd put here is the Blackhawks. I mean, this is an obvious rebuilding. I mean, this is an obvious rebuild, no questions. And now they literally have the worst contract off their books. So it's about the next 3 years is surrounding Bedard with the best environment to succeed, right?
yep. And I
And
think
then
you had one more team, right?
yeah,
So the Sharks.
the last
Yeah.
team here is the Sharks. The way I'd order them, if I were to order them, is I'd have the Flyers last because I think their rebuild's behind because they don't have.
I think this is the order, right? Is this the correct
Yeah,
order you probably
I think
have
this
them in?
is the
Yeah.
order.
Yeah.
Um,
I was gonna say the Sharks had the most promising, I think the most promising rebuild out of the three so far. Because I think just because they found the number
Mike
one center
Greer
in
is
Celebrini.
so good with asset management. Like the best examples I could use are he acquired a second and Jake Wallman from the Red Wings, and now he traded Jake Wallman for more assets. Like just as an example, and then the Mackenzie Blackwood one, right? He basically spent a low pick to take a chance on Blackwood, and then flipped him for a higher pick. Like his asset management is so good, and those are things you can parlay into other players. They have the cap space. They have a good surrounding environment around their player. Like you have guys like Tyler Toffoli, you have guys like Fabian Zetterlund, you have the younger guys like Eklund, Will Smith, you have Celebrini, obviously. They just need one or two defensemen, which obviously isn't as easy as it sounds, but like
But they have a few. They have a few in their system, right? I think Sam Dickinson's one they have in their system, and then Mumajulin, if I pronounce his name correctly, is the other one that they're hoping kind of pans out, right? Plus, I think they've already figured out. I think that, like you said, the hardest thing to figure out is the number one center, and I hate to say this, but Celebrini
they have it.
looks
Yeah.
looks the part in his first year, and it's hard for a guy to look that part in the rookie season. And not only is he doing it, he's doing it in a pretty impressive fashion too.
And they also have the goalie, right? Like, say what you. I mean, Askarov's had some bad moments, but like you see the potential. So it's like, to me, that they're between the top six and potentially the goalie, and like there's just a lot more there right now. So yeah, I would have them ordered this way. The next tier is will this ever end? These are the teams that have been rebuilding and are still going. I have two teams here. I have the Ducks. I don't know. Like they seem to be better right now, but it just doesn't seem sustainable. They have a lot of questions on the roster. Like for example, Carlson's been really hot recently, but like he's riding an insanely unsustainable shooting percentage. I don't know. Like if you ask me who the best player on this roster is, I might say it's Jackson Lacombe or Troy Terry right now, which isn't.
I was gonna say maybe Frank Vetrano as the third guy, maybe,
like,
but that's about it.
Like right now, a lot of I'd say, in terms of talent, if I'm being honest, like trajectory, I think they're behind like the Sharks, Flyers, the Sharks and the Blackhawks because those guys feel like they have at least their established franchise guys going forward. I don't know who it is on the Ducks, like outside of maybe.
Well,
Lucas
also I was gonna say the Ducks aren't really using their players in the right spot too. For example, I think you drafted Mason McTavish third overall, but you're playing him on the third line. I don't see how that. Why are you playing Ryan Strome on the first line? Like that's the first thing I have to ask. And then you have young guys like Zegras who, you drafted in the top 10, right? He had 2 really good years, and he was supposed to be a big piece of your future. And now it looks like you want to trade him, and it looks like he's going to be one of those guys who needs a fresh start somewhere else. And knowing the Ducks and how things work out, he's probably going to get traded somewhere and then have a renaissance, right? Or a resurgence of sorts and kind of find his career again,
French, right? Renaissance. But
yeah,
no, like to me, honestly, it's weird. If you ask me who the best young forward on this team is, like right now, I couldn't tell you. Like Carlson shows flashes of a good two-way game. McTavish and Zegras obviously show flashes as well, but like I couldn't really tell you.
And then Cutter Gauthier, for example, has shown bits and pieces, right? So
yeah. But like he's kind of a more like as larger forwards come, they're going to take them a little bit more time. Like right now, they're being propped up a lot by their goaltending. Like Dostal and Gibson have been exceptional relative to what they've had to face. Gibson just made one of the craziest saves recently, like where he went almost like behind the back kind of save, which was awesome. But like right now, and then even their D is like I think Lacombe's clearly their number one guy on D, but like we still don't know what Zellweger and Minchikov are. So yeah, I have them here. Like, and this is gonna be another year they're gonna rebuild possibly, and then Again, do they make the playoffs next year? Even who knows? And then the next one in this category, and the last one, this is just super disappointing because like I honestly like this team on paper better than so many other teams, but I just don't understand why this team can't put it together. Like Tage Thompson is insanely good, and he has.
I was gonna say they have the pieces
shot,
on this team.
His power play shot is
one of the best one timers. Yeah.
Oh my god,
one of the best one timers in the league. I feel like so.
Like they have Tage, they have a number one center. Dylan Cousins hasn't. It's weird. Dylan Cousins is weird because like he's really underplaying his metrics, but like he should be better than he is. But like I think Cousins is fine as a number 2, number 3 center. They have guys like Paterka on the wings who are pretty good. Their defense on paper, their defense on paper, you have Dahlin who's a really good number 1 D man. You have Power, you have Byram.
Byram's is a good number 2, and then Power's a guy who's still finding his rhythm, right? And then I think you tried that whole long-term deal with Matthias Samuelsson, hoping he'd be like, you know, the solidifying defenseman for you guys. But I don't think it's worked out quite as much for the Sabres as they probably hoped, right?
But then UPL's like honestly he's fine for
he's an average goalie, and then you hope maybe Devin Levi. He looked really bad in the 9 games he did play this year, but you hope maybe he figures it out, and maybe if he is better than UPL, then you at least have your starter there. Otherwise, you at least have an average goalie at the minimum.
It's just frustrating because like this team should be better. They have more talent. Like this team has more talent than like a lot of the other teams that had like. I think they're more talented than the Islanders. I think they're more talented than the Bruins. I think they're more talented than the Flames, the Blues. They're more talented than the Flyers.
They also have a lot of young pieces that are on the come up too, right? Like Yuri Kulich is playing first. Like he's on the first line. He's playing first line minutes as your first line center right now. I think they have Thompson at right wing right now, and then you have another one like Jack Quinn who's been on their power play. He's been pretty solid overall, but you know he's on the third line right now.
I feel like it's weird. I think they're a better team than Ducks, but I feel so much worse for Sabres fans because it's like they're literally asking, when will this ever end?
Well, I was gonna say too, because like I don't know, I saw a video from another YouTuber urinating tree. I don't know, it was like the duality of Buffalo franchises, right? Because on one spectrum, you have the Buffalo Bills, who, despite losing to the Chiefs every year in the playoffs, you know, at least you taste like some playoff glory, some success, exactly. Whereas the Sabres, I hate to say this, I haven't seen any sort of success out of them. When was the last time we saw success out of them? Was it the last time they made the playoffs? Like, was it back in like 20
years, maybe?
Yeah, Ryan Miller years, exactly. That's how far back we have to go just to figure that out.
It's just unfortunate, man. Like it's weird. They used to be more successful with less talent, which is weird. Anyways,
and now they have more talent. They suck.
Yeah. Moving on to the next category. This is Reality Bites. This is like, you know, we had a fantasy of how this was gonna go, and it just has not worked out this way. First team here with a Screaming Bullet, the Predators. And if you have any objections or pushback on this, let me know. I get it. Barry Trotz is royalty in Nashville. Fair enough. But like, has anyone ever misevaluated their own roster, more than Barry Trotz did this past offseason?
I think what happened with the Predators too was I think what they tried to do was they overplayed. Like, I think last year was a bit of they overplayed their metrics quite a bit, and they outplayed what kind of team they should have been, right? And I think what Barry Trotz tried to do was, if I bring in a couple of, you know, big names, some big pieces in, even if there is some regression, this team is still capable of at least, you know, making the playoffs. Maybe if they can sneak off a hot run, they can make the playoffs, right? The problem is, I feel like this is the 18-wheeler going off the cliff scenario where everything has just gone wrong. Roman Yossi's still been pretty solid, but he's not been producing like he normally has. Stamkos' production has fallen off a cliff. Marchessault's been okay. Forsberg's production kind of fell off a bit. He's not the 40 goal scorer that we thought he was. And then I think goaltending, Saros has, you know, fallen off a bit too, just because I think in years past he's been, you know, Vezina caliber, whereas this year a little bit closer to below average, more or less. So
like I said before,
everything's kind of gone wrong.
This is the worst situation of the league. Like, it's older players on long-term contracts. It's minimal prospect equity in their system and on the roster. There's no young talent. The only upside,
and you're stuck with heavy cap too, right? You're stuck with players with heavy cap hits, and you suck. I hate to say this, but it's the equivalent of the Toronto Blue Jays in the MLB right now. You have one of the higher-ish, like not higher payrolls, but like you're investing so much money yet you still suck.
This is the only upside is they're not like San Jose a couple years ago where they actually have their own picks at least. But otherwise, this is the worst situation in the league. And like the vibe and body language on this team, if you watch them, is terrible. Like this is.
I feel like everyone's just sort of given. It looks like everyone's just sort of given up, hasn't it? Or I don't know. Maybe it's just me,
Like,
but they look deflated.
There's just if it goes bad early, that team looks so deflated by the end. I feel bad for Yusei Saros too, because you watch some of the turnovers and some of the odd man rushes, and you're just like, what is going on with this team? But yeah, to me, like again, like they thought it was gonna. I thought they were gonna be where maybe Minnesota was now, or like maybe where the Kings are, kind of like just firmly in the third, fourth spot. This has to be like one of the worst misevaluations ever. And now you have no choice but to kind of rebuild with old vets, which if you saw what San Jose had to do a couple of years ago, it's not impossible, but it's one of the worst spots you can be in.
Well, I was gonna say you never want to rebuild with the old vets. I think the first thing you want to do in a rebuild is you get rid of the old vets, but the problem is you can't get rid of them. So you're kind of stuck where I don't want to say it's an anchor dragging you down, but it really does feel like an anchor is tied to your leg and you're being slowly pulled to the bottom of the ocean.
100%. Next team here, speaking of water and oceans, the Islanders. I don't know what Lou Lamoriello thinks this team is, but it doesn't feel like. And look, here's the thing. I get the standings are close and everything's kind of murky, but like when you read the articles by him wanting to extend Brock Nelson and Pajot and guys like that, it's like no, this team's not a playoff contender.
Well, also the other one I saw was you're trying to trade Noah Dobson. Excuse me, what? I don't know what Lou's trying to do. I don't know if Lou just hates all the young players and he only likes veterans. I think that's what he's been like throughout his career. He loves his veterans, but I feel like he loves his veterans way too much. And if you're going to trade a guy like Dobson, you probably deserve, no offense, you probably deserve to get shot. I'm sorry.
Like this team's just, they're not a playoff team. There's not enough scoring on this roster. They have one of the worst power plays in the league. I'm still not sure if Patrick Waugh is a good coach at an NHL level. That's another thing. And aside from, like, if you look at their defense, their team's also weirdly old. Like outside of Dobson, Holmstrom, and maybe one or two other guys, a lot of this roster is either like 30 plus, which is not the spot to be in. And again, I know this team made 2 Western Conference Finals a couple of years ago, but this team just needs to start rebuilding. Whatever this iteration of it is, just isn't it.
Well, I was going to say, too, the Islanders have just been kind of picking up the scraps from other teams, right? So Adam Boquist didn't work out in Florida. Now he's there. Tony DeAngelo. That was more of a desperation move, right? With Dobson's injury, they needed a defenseman to play power play 1. Yet somehow, when Dobson's healthy now, let's not play him on PP1 because why not? I just feel like this team overall just feels like a shit show, right? Because
it's a treadmill team. They're just going in circles and nothing's being accomplished.
It's not even going in circles. It feels like they're trying to go against the treadmill, and it's just getting worse because your coach is being stupid and not playing your best defenseman on the power play. Your GM is being stupid and instead of rebuilding is trying to keep all the old vets around and extend them and keep you further in cap hell. It just feels like this team's not doing anything right. It feels like they're doing nothing right. Low key.
And honestly, like to me, them and Nashville, again, Nashville's the worst situation. The Isles might be a close second for me. Well, not a close second, but like a firm second for me. Another team I'd throw here, the Penguins. The Penguins kind of acknowledged the rebuild this year, at least. Like after the Karlsson trade, it's clear it hasn't worked out. Now they're moving whatever assets they can that aren't, Crosby, Malkin, Letang. And I think that's fine. Like they're taking chances on guys like Rucker, McGroarty, guys who have first round pedigree, which I like. Like they're just, making moves around the edges, and they're going to end up with a top 10 pick, and they can kind of start, doing that as well. Like I have no problem with what the Penguins did. The Karlsson trade actually got a lot of bad cap off their roster. They took a swing with it. It didn't work, and now they're pivoting. Fine. I'm okay with that.
It feels kind of weird though because they made the trades they made. I think the Novak. I know you thought that they're trying to see what Novak is like, but it felt like they kind of just gained. To me, it kind of felt like they just gained more cap on that trade. So I don't know. I would have had them in the trust the process rebuild, but then that second trade kind of confused me a little bit for sure. I don't know.
We can have them there as well. Like that's fine.
The problem is my problem is I don't it's they don't fit in. Will this ever end? They haven't. I don't want to say they haven't fully embraced the rebuild. So I can't have them entrust the process because they haven't actually fully embraced
so I
it.
think this is
they haven't traded Crosby, haven't traded Malkin.
I think it's reality
that kind of thing.
bites based on what they thought the Carlson trade was going to do a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
The other team I have here is the Bruins. Look, hey, big ups to the Bruins, man. They've been a good team for almost 20 years, and even though they're close to a playoff spot, this team just isn't it. And I think they kind of realize that too, because you hear the rumors about them asking if people asking if Marchand might be available. But you look at this team, like the center depth on this team is horrible. Like I like Morgan Geekie. He shouldn't be a first line power play one forward. He just shouldn't. Like the rest of this team outside of McAvoy, Lowry looks good, but even the defense isn't that great.
Yeah, it's not the defense of previous years, right? Because the one thing the Bruins were known for was having a very good defensive system and being a very good defensive team, right? And that hasn't been the case this year. Plus, with Swayman's holdout and all that's happened, he's been a below average to basically average goalie this year. And unfortunately, you needed him to be that above average Vezina candidate kind of goalie to even have any shot. And now that they realize that they're not gonna, like, if they make the playoffs, maybe they're a first round exit. But now that they know that, they've decided, well, it's probably better to miss the playoffs and get some assets back, even for their beloved players like Marchand. It's better for that than to be kind of stuck in that purgatory, right? Although I guess with the Bruins, my question is, what do you do with, I guess with like Elias Lindholm, for example, right? Because you signed him, everyone thought he'd be the perfect. You have to ride it out. I don't know. It just feels. I get it, but it feels so tough to have to ride that out and then have to trade Marchand, who's like kind of the heart and soul of your team. I don't know.
They don't
that's
have
rough.
to. Like they can also just kind of do what Pittsburgh's doing, where you keep those franchise guys if they want to stay, and then just rebuild the rest of the roster around them. Like that's fine too. Like I do like that. It sucks because you talk about a couple years ago they were, the best team in the East, and then the year before beat the Leafs, lost them for second round. But it's like, yeah, man, hey, that's the reality. Contention windows come at you fast, and honestly, having Bergeron, Krejci, Chara, all those guys play as long and as good as they did is like teams don't generally get that level of production for that sustained a period of time. So like now, again, 20 years later, you have to rebuild. They went for it a bit with the Lindholm thing. It wasn't working. They pivoted. I'm fine with it.
That makes sense. I think, I don't know. I guess in reality bites, do you have one more team here, or were you going to move on to the next tier?
Two, I think. So I put the Kraken here just because I think they, like, the Montour trade and some of the signings last year, this past offseason, kind of thought that maybe they were going to give it a shot, you thought? And then it just
hasn't worked out. Yeah, it hasn't worked out.
Again,
and they've pivoted with the move, with the trade, the Tampa trade, for example. They've pivoted and they've dealt some of their guys, starting to get assets back to kind of help. They're starting to trend towards a rebuild, but they haven't made all the moves to fully transition to the rebuild where we can say, oh yeah, I trust the process, right?
And they're taking chances on guys, right? Like taking a chance on Capo, regardless of how it turns out, and he's been good for them, is like a really smart move, right? And they still have guys like younger guys like Tolvanen who can play a role. Like it's not all bereft, and they have all their own picks, right? Which is another important aspect to this.
Plus, they have a few young guys like Beniers and Wright are still there, right? They have pieces that they're trying to figure out if they're going to become number one. If one of them will become a number one center, essentially.
I mean, Decord's emerged second good year. Again, Riker Evans showed potential while he was their power play one, line two defenseman. Like it's possible. Like again, there are pieces there. It's just they're pivoting at the right time, and like they're trading. And there's probably other moves to come, like McCann, Schwartz, potentially Dunn. Maybe if they bite, like if somebody bites on Montour, or like there's a lot of like pieces available that they can get more assets and have a clearer cap. They can get guys in free agency. Like there's definitely spots here for sure, but it sucks because like again, reality comes at you fast, right? A couple of years ago, you were almost made the Western Conference Final, and now here you are rebuilding, right? And then I was gonna say that
they have like the same average age as like Vegas, but like they don't have Vegas' success, which is kind of unfortunate. But that's how I guess that's
like
how
they see those stories of two people that went the exact same path, and like one ended up like rich and marrying a supermodel, and the other one ended up with a drug habit. Like it's kind of
Yeah,
like what happened here.
that story in a nutshell. Yeah.
And the last one, okay, so this is the one I'm iffy on. I said the Rangers.
I'm iffy on them because what happened with the Rangers is they're actually finally back in a wild card spot. So I think today they made the move for so they traded Riley Smith, which made me think, oh, maybe they're accepting that they're not going to go for it this year, because they've tried with some of the major moves, like they acquired JT Miller to try to bolster their team and make a push away. They got rid of Lindgren because he was kind of an anchor for that team. Right?
I just don't know what this team.
But then they made the trade for Susie, which kind of confused me because it's like, okay, now they're trying to improve their defense. So where do they really fit? They're not. I don't know. I wouldn't call them a mid team. Like they're mid for what they are right now, but they're not decidedly mid. They're not up and coming. They're definitely not happy to be here. That's for sure.
I just put them in reality bites because I think this team thought they were a Stanley Cup contender, and they're not that. They're not. They're a fringe playoff team right now. Now, would it scare me to face them just because of the star power like Shesterkin, Fox, Miller, Panarin? Yes, absolutely. Not going to say no, but it's like this roster just feels. I don't explain it. It felt like it was such a promising roster a couple years ago, and now you don't have any young talent really on the roster. It's all outside of Lafreniere, and again, it's a veteran roster. It's pretty much a veteran roster. Like that's what this is at this point. And right now, this veteran roster is like fringes of a playoff spot.
You might not even make the playoffs. So I don't know. It's kind of curious to see how it plays out with them. I think with the Rangers, one last note I'll add is I am curious what they do tomorrow. I kind of wish we did the tier list tomorrow, just because we could at least see with the trades they made where we could put them. Because, like I said, they traded away Riley Smith, which we looked like they accepted they weren't going to make the playoffs. But then they were like, "Oh, let's acquire a defenseman because our defense sucks." I don't know. I don't know what the Rangers are trying to do. I don't know if
they're the team I'm most confused by, because again, you mentioned it, right? Like trading Riley Smith indicates like you're rebuilding. But then they signed William Borgren, who like after the Kako trade, which indicates like maybe they were going for it a bit, and then they traded for JT Miller, which like I don't think affects your trajectory as much as like it was just the deal was so good you couldn't say no, which is fine. Like I'm okay with that. But again, that kind of does indicate a bit more contention. And then trading for Susie, but it's like you're also getting rid of all these depth pieces too. So I don't know.
And then we also forget about the Trouba. We forget about the Trouba move, right? Dumping Trouba to kind of help your cap situation to become a better team too. That's kind of I don't know. The Rangers, I don't know what they're trying to do, low key.
I don't know. Chris Drury should have a lot more scrutiny on him than he probably does. But like, this
I have a hot take. I feel like he should have been. I don't want to say he should have been fired by now, but I low key think he should have just been fired by now at this point.
Well, think about this, right? Like, how many years ago was it? They had like Buchnevich, they had Kako, they had Cheadle, they had Lafreniere, and like this was a team we thought, okay, they have the young guys to balance with the older guys. All those guys are gone, except Lafreniere.
Well, you started with the Buchnevich for Sammy Blais, which I'm not going to lie, that was probably one of the worst trades I've ever seen in my life. You trading Cheadle for Miller is fine. You do get older, which is kind of because if you were trying to you can't really pivot for a rebuild if you're going to trade for Miller because he's older, and the reality is you have to go for it with the older guys. And then, I mean, they dumped one of their younger players in Kako, who it looks even worse now because he looks good in Seattle, so it looks even worse because it looks like as the Rangers you couldn't get anything out of him, but somehow the Kraken managed to find and squeeze more out of him than you ever did, right?
No, and even honestly, Cheadle looks better in Vancouver than he did in New York too. So,
well, he's getting the opportunity in Vancouver, right? So I think that has to help to a certain extent.
And then they traded Lindgren as well, which I mean, Lindgren wasn't great this year, but it's like I don't know, just kind of a weird mishmash. I just think reality bit them, like I said, because everyone thought this team would finish first in the Metro, potential Stanley Cup contender, and that's just not it. Do you have any objections to anyone here, or no?
I'm just trying to see if there's anybody I want to add here, but I mean, I was gonna say all the other teams. Reality hasn't really hit them so I can't really add anyone here. Let's move on to decidedly
mid. This is
as I like to call it mid.
Yeah, just like that's how I feel about them. First one's the Flames. This is a team that was supposed to be rebuilding. But, like, I don't know what the plan is because the team can't score, and it's pretty much relying on Dustin Wolf and a decent defense to keep them afloat. Like, I don't know what the plan is here.
I haven't. It's funny because I have a story that you'll probably be aware of. So we were at Montana's, I think, a couple weeks back, and we saw the Flames and Panthers game, and the shots were like 30 to 6 or 30 to 9. It was a slaughter.
It was a microcosm. So by period 2, I think Dan Blader was in it. The shots were 30 to 10, and it's a microcosm of what Florida is in a way, where it's sorry, not Florida. Well, both Florida and Calgary, but what Calgary is, we're just Calgary against certain teams will just be run out of the building because they're just not good enough. Right now, only one Nazem Kadri has 75 points in 82 game, which is great. But after him, the next highest leading scorer is 0.72 points per game on the roster. They only have one guy over 60 points on the entire team. This team just does not score.
Well, like I said, the game plan is, or like you said, the game plan is Dustin Wolf, please save us. I think that's literally the only game plan they have, and the only with the players they have, and with the
my bad. I was being generous to Kadri. Sorry, I was looking at last year's. They have nobody over 0.8 points per game.
I mean, frankly, I'm not surprised with the forwards they have on that team. I'm not surprised.
Okay,
if we want
to guess what the highest amount of points a player on their team has right now. I told you who it is, but guess what the highest number is?
42.
46.
Okay, close enough.
That's the highest. Guess what the highest scoring defenseman has on their team?
33?
35. Yeah, this team just does not score.
Is it Uyghur? I think
they're 31st. Yeah, it's Uyghur. 31st in the league in goals for, too. Bears us out. But this team's in a playoff spot because the Pacific sucks, and Dustin Wolf is very good. That's just basic. Dustin Wolf and their defense is, I'll say, their defense is pretty solid.
They're gonna make the playoffs, and they're gonna get slaughtered by whoever they play in the first round. I think that's the outcome we're all expecting.
The thing is, I do like some of the pieces. Kadri's. I think Kadri's miscast as a number 1, but he's a good number 2. I like Uyghur. I think Uyghur's pretty good. Obviously, Dustin Wolf. Rasmus Anderson's a good defense, and he's a guy, for example, if you want to trade him, could fetch you something decent at the deadline. And then there are guys again, I think Zary and stuff that have potential, but they haven't shown it.
I like Coronado because Coronado's a former top 10 pick, and I mean they're giving him the deployment to kind of he's a good scoring forward in college, and they're giving him the deployment to try to develop. So I like him as a player. He's probably not the number 1. He's not a line 1 forward yet. Maybe he gets there, maybe he doesn't. But I like that they're giving him the chance to. But I mean, apart from him, I'm not a big fan of the other pieces on this team.
Yeah,
apart from Dustin Wolf.
This team's been even last year. I mentioned it. I know, Kadri. I mentioned the 75 points last season, but my point was this team didn't score a lot last season either. Last year, Kadri was their highest score at 75 points in 82 games. The next highest scoring guy was Yegor Sharangovich with 59, right? And then this year it's even worse. So it's well, you could maybe blame Ryan Huska, but I mean, at the end of the day, the talent on this team just isn't there. But again, they're in the middle of a playoff spot. So, I guess they're just either going to miss the playoffs or be first-round cannon fodder, pretty much.
Yeah.
All right, the other team I have here is the Blues. I don't know, man.
I don't know what's up with this Blues team because first of all, they're I don't want to say they're one of the worst coach teams in the league, but they make so many moves that I never understand. So I'll give you a hypothetical. I own Robert Thomas in fantasy. He is probably by far their best forward. They do this stupid thing where they put him on PP2 every now and then. I get their power play's been struggling, but surely your highest scoring forward and your best forward surely stays on PP1 regardless, right? I don't know. That's just one example of how stupid as a team they are, I think. Binghamton's been okay. He's been kind of meh. I think everyone overhypes him from the Four Nations Cup. And then a lot of the other forwards like Buchnevich just haven't been as good as they have been in previous years.
They just make a weird mix of moves, right? Because they get Holloway and Broberg, which were really good moves, right? Especially with the deployment they give them, they let them play a bit more. But then it's they trade for Cam Fowler. So now their defense literally consists of Fowler, who's 33, Parayko, who's 31, and Falk, who's 32.
Who's 34, right? 32, 34. I don't know how old they're.
They're
all in their 30s.
But it's weird because their centers are really their centers are the core of this team. Like Kyrou, Thomas, and Holloway are the guys going forward, right? Like, and then honestly, that's not a bad. Them plus Broberg isn't a bad young grouping going forward. They have all these old guys. I feel like they should start moving off of, and they haven't yet. Like Braden Shen, I feel like should definitely.
Well, they're trying to move Braden Shen. I know because they're trying to extort a first and Fraser Minton out of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but Leafs aren't biting on that one apparently. And they also have other players too. Like Neighbors is a good young player, right? I like Jake Neighbors. I mean, I'm looking at the rest of it, but then apart from that, I don't really like the rest of the team. Like Vucinovic is kind of declined.
They don't have a ton of prospects in the pipeline. Like I think they have Jimmy Snugarud, and that's kind of it, right? In terms of like marquee guys you're expecting. So it's kind of this weird. And again, they're weird where they're not a horrible team, but they're not like they're firmly out of a top 4 seed in the Central right now. So it's like, well, what are we doing here, right?
Yeah, like I'm looking at their prospects. The only ones that maybe might be able to contribute are, like you said, Snugarud and I think Dalibor Dvorsky. Those are the only two I think could help this team at this point.
Yeah, that's kind of pretty much it. I have them there. I get it sucks because I do like some of the I like Kyrou, Thomas, and again the Broberg Holloway moves are great. I think Joel Hofer has some potential as well, and you mentioned Jake Neighbors, but it is like the ceiling on this team just isn't that high. And then the last one here, I hate to put them here because I felt so much higher on them last year. The Canucks. And honestly, this is because, I blame Elias Pettersson for this ranking. That's it.
No, I blame Elias. No, you know, there's I don't know if you probably never watched SpongeBob, but there's this quote. It's like, the guy's like, he burned our crops, he destroyed our things, and he goes, right. Everyone's like, he did, and he's like, no, but are we going to wait for him to do that? And I feel like
Elias Pettersson, hold on, no, my hot take, if Elias Pettersson doesn't get back to his form, he already did that, because he's the reason you traded JT Miller. He's the reason. And, the whole reason you trade JT Miller ideally was, one, Pettersson was younger, and two, he was your franchise guy. And the idea is, you trade you trade JT Miller, hey, Pettersson, you better do your thing. And, he has not.
Well, the other problem with Pettersson, too, is the no movement clause kicks in, I think, July 1st. So it's like, you either hope he rebounds, or you accept that if he doesn't rebound, you're stuck with an anchor of a contract for as long as you have. And I'll talk a bit more about the Pettersson struggles in the next podcast, because I have a whole sheet of facts on that.
To me, if you get Pettersson from last year, this is up and coming.
Well, even the Pettersson from last year had some issues. But I mean, the Pettersson from last year was much better than, the Pettersson of this year, for example. But if you get the Pettersson of last year, this team is still okay. It's still an okay team overall.
Right. And the other thing, too, is Demko being hurt and now having this potentially reoccurring injury also caps this team. So it's like, you have Quinn Hughes as an absolute superstar. You have decent supporting players in Besser, Garland, and the like. Cheadle actually looks good as a second-line center. But it's like, unless Demko can fully stay healthy, because as good as Lankinen is, the peak of Demko, he's just not that. And,
peak Demko is just by far better than, I hate to say it, this is peak Lankinen, ironically.
Yeah,
and
100%. Even
though he kept you in it for early parts of the year, I don't think it's something you expect to hold up. Yeah. I think this really comes down to, does Elias Pettersson figure things out?
And if he does, walk with Elias or not? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If yes, we'll be an okay team. I still think even if Elias Pettersson figures it out, I'm not going to say I'd keep them in decidedly mid, but it'd at least be there's more of an argument to take them out of this tier. But with Pettersson being the way he is, they are mid.
So there's another team I wanted to put here, but I was constantly debating. What are your thoughts on putting the Kings here?
I was just about to say the Kings. You know what? I'm actually fine with putting the Kings here, because they're not up and coming They're not up and coming anymore. Because look, I hate to say,
especially because they're not even playing Brant Clark. So
yeah. So first things first, I don't know why you bench your blue chip prospect defenseman, who, according to defensive metrics, he's been average as a defenseman. So you can't even make the excuse that he's a bad defenseman. He's been okay defensively. He's probably your best offensive defenseman, yet it's cool. We'll scratch him because why the fuck not?
It's not only that. Think about how many young defensemen they got rid of that are useful contributors in other teams, right? So, don't get me wrong. I think the Kevin Fiala for Brock Faber trade was fine, but you got rid of Brock Faber. You let Sean Jersey walk. You got rid of Matt Roy, and now you're not playing Brant Clark. So it's what are you doing?
Well, also with the Kings too, they're no longer up and coming anymore because a lot of their young guys just haven't panned out. Right, like Turcotte hasn't panned out. Byfield's
hasn't panned out.
Byfield's had made solid progression, but it feels for a third, like the second or basically a top 3 pick, the progression feels too slow. I think you mentioned Kaliev. He just hasn't panned out to the point where he got traded to the Rangers. Yeah, he got traded to the Rangers.
Okay.
And there's just no more young. To me, there's just no more young prospects up and coming for this team to actually help supplement the score because your number one center in Kopitar is getting older. He's going to retire.
And the most important guys on this team were Kopitar, Kempe, Danault, because Danault is still a Selke level defensive center, and again, guys like Doughty and Kemper who are in their mid-30s. What's the plan with this team? You're gonna just get destroyed by Edmonton round 1 again? I was originally having them happy to be here because I thought maybe, but if you're a Kings fan, are you happy to just face Edmonton and get run over again? Why is that fun?
No, man. If I'm the Kings fans, I'm not happy with how things have turned out. Plus, if you're a Kings fan, you're maybe thinking, oh, maybe we have some prospects coming up. Apparently, you have the number 26th ranked prospect pool, so you don't even have that to look forward to.
This team, it's just. I was debating on this team, and I just look at the trajectory, look at the young talent they've jettisoned, look at the young talent that hasn't panned out, and look at what their playoff plans are, which is basically to just be first round fodder to Edmonton for the 4th year in a row or something like that. To me, they're just mid, and honestly, their upside is so much worse than Vancouver's to me.
I mean, I was going to say with Vancouver, there's at least hope that maybe Pettersson figures it out, and you have a superstar in Hughes, right? I think LA, I don't want to say you don't have that superstar, but you really don't.
They don't.
You don't have it, yeah. And the one guy you maybe that could become that, you're scratching him. Yeah. Good job, LA. You're ruining your best asset.
I will say, I forgot who. I think it was John Scott who mentioned this. Guys who are former Hall of Fame level players that became GMs on their team, while obviously you can't say it's a good or bad thing overall, they definitely do get way more rope than a regular GM would. And to me, Rob Blake's just gotten way too much rope with this Kings roster right now.
So it
was cute. It was cute when they were making the playoffs, and we thought oh, they have all these prospects, they're making the playoffs, but that novelty's worn off. Now it's
worn off now that no one of that prospect pool name me a prospect from that prospect pool that's panned out. And I don't count Byfield because Byfield was supposed we all expected him to, right?
I guess I don't know. Clark looked good when Doughty was out, but that's it. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say now they're scratching him, so it's even worse.
Crazy though, right? Remember when they were up and coming, Kaliev, Turcotte, Cal Peterson, and then again. You talk about guys they had Faber, Dursey, none of these guys are either there anymore or they're just marginal at best. It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, if I'm a Kings fan, I'm not gonna say I feel so depressed, but with how things, if you look at Kings fans from in the years past to a Kings fan now. Man, that's the ultimate depression hit, isn't it? Just watching your prospects not pan out, losing to Edmonton every single year, and now
it's
you just have
you're
nothing
not
to look
getting closer to beating Edmonton. It feels like you're getting further. As the years go, it's just getting less likely, not more likely. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, now we'll move. Do you have any other teams to put mid? I don't. I think that was it for me.
I'm looking, but. No, I think that's everybody for mid. Okay. I think most of the other teams are young teams that are on the rise now, right? And I think that's the next one we're talking about, up and coming.
So up and coming, the Habs, I think is the first one. There's a lot of good pieces on this roster. Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield. Slavkovsky is a big question mark, but who knows?
Lane Hudson.
Lane Hudson, Caden Gould. Montebo's looked pretty good despite being bombarded at times. There's pieces here. When it comes together, I'm not sure, but it could be next year. It could be the year after, but it's promising. We'll just leave it at that.
Well, I was going to say, you have the biggest issue you have was, do you have a number one center? Yes, you have it in
You
Suzuki.
have one.
Do you have a first line? Do you have another first line winger with you? Probably Caulfield. Yes, even though
Maybe
he's
Demidov too. Yeah.
maybe Demidov. Yeah, Demidov looks really good in the KHL. I don't know. I'm kind of excited to see him. For your defenseman, do you have that offensive dynamo? Yes, you have Lane
Yes.
Hudson. Will he be like a first pairing? Will he be, for example, the number one defenseman? I don't know. Maybe like he's
His
more of a number.
offensive game is so advanced for a young player. I would like.
I wouldn't rule it out, but his defensive game leaves a lot to be desired.
But
So
I
a little
think
bit
you can
questionable
mitigate
there.
that. Like maybe you pair him with a guy like maybe Gould becomes that, right? It's possible.
Yeah.
And then there's
Or you
other
just
prospects.
find a defensive defenseman and
Yeah.
just pair him with. You find one in the off season and pair him, right?
And there's prospects in the pool that are still coming. There's cap
Demidov.
space available soon. Yeah, like it's a they're like, and ideally maybe for them their rise kind of coincides with like the end of like Tampa and Florida's peaks. And yeah, like that's kind of where that is. Second team, the Senators. Like again, I think they're a year or two away. I really like Sanderson. Shabbat looks really good this year after like a couple questionable years. Miralainen might be something. I don't know 100%, but
I mean, but you also have Allmark. You already have Allmark there, right? And Allmark's been
Yeah.
pretty. Like he was really good before the injuries, right? He was the only reason why. I don't want to say he's the only reason why, but he's one of the biggest reasons why they were hanging on to a wild card spot at that one point.
and then
Plus, you have guys like Stutzla who've just continued to
their
produce.
center
Brady
center
Tkachuk.
lineup is solid. Like yeah, you have and their winger like it's just a young group. Like but Pinto, you have like what Pinto. Norris is back after like the injury plagued down years. He's injured now, but like at least he's playing a bit more. You still have Stutzla, you have Batherson, you have Tkachuk. Like this is it's a solid up and coming roster. I think it just needs to mature a bit, and you can do that while collecting assets. And now you have ownership that'll actually spend to the cap. So like really important for Ottawa as well. So I think again this is another up and coming team. Hard to say who's better between them and Montreal, but yeah, like kind of on that same tier. The team I'm probably excited the most about, one of the teams I'm excited the most about going to next year that fills out this tier for me, Utah are the Zombie Coyotes. Why did you get the Kachina? Why did you get the Kachina logo?
Oh no, I just pulled this tier list off template, so it just kept most of the old logos. And I had to throw the Kraken one there.
I'll let it pass. But that's still my one of my favorite logos ever. But dude, I'm so excited about this team this next year. Oh my gosh! Like, I don't know.
Well, I was gonna say they have the pieces sort of figured out, right? So, for example, I think Cooley's looked really good. I think he looks like he could be their first line center of the future. Gunther's the big one. Gunther just has I think he has one of the best shots in the league, low key. Like I don't.
Yeah, man. Like one thing I know people hate the All-Star game. I just love to see a shooting competition between guys like Gunther, Tage, Ovechkin. Like just something like that would be so fun. But yeah, I love this. Like this team is so fun. Like again, Keller, Cooley, Gunther, Sergachev potentially is their D1. Like Schmaltz is just a kind of a consistent guy that's there. And they also have young guys again coming up like Jackson Stauber's promising as a goalie prospect, Tija Ginla as well. And they're, again, now, unlike the old Coyotes, an owner that will spend to the cap. So you have all this talent. You have, again, Hayton. You have Cooley. You have Gunther.
You still have Keller.
You have Keller. Like,
Yeah.
You have all these guys. If you can fill out the defense and these guys mature, like, this team could be really, really good.
Plus, they already have Sergachev back there, and he's looked pretty good.
Yeah.
Like for them, so I mean,
this team, like I said, this team is young. Like the oldest core player on this team is probably, if you count Vejmelka as a core player, it's probably him. And he's 28. Like the oldest guys on this team are like Nick Bustad, Alexander Kerfoot, Oli Mata. Like
they're guys that aren't going to be there in like a few years anyways. So or guys you're probably looking to trade at some point anyways. So
like
their oldest future's bright.
Their oldest key forward is Nick Schmaltz, who's like 28. So it's like. I really like this team. Like, it sucks they couldn't do it in Arizona, but like, this team could become really good really quickly.
I mean, I'm excited to see how they turn out in a few years. I'm especially with. I think I'm excited to see if Tija Ginla turns out to be a big piece for them because they already have so much offensive talent, right? So just another piece there. Maybe they could use him in a trade for a defenseman at some point. Because I think defenseman is what they're kind of lacking after Sergachev.
Mm-hmm. I think they're one of the teams that could swing offensive assets for a defensive player for sure. All right, happy to be here. I have a couple teams. The Red Wings. Look, it was so bad. Do I think this team's trajectory overall is that great? No, but it was so bad at the beginning with Alex Lalonde that at this point, like, we're sorry.
You mean Derek Lalonde?
Sorry,
right?
Derek Lalonde. I think Alex Lalonde's an old-time hockey player, and I get their names confused all the time. But like, they were so bad with him that like, just bringing in a veteran coach who shows competency just elevate the team. And like, compared to where they started to where they are now, I think like just being in this spot right now, like they're just happy to be here.
Yeah, I mean I think there was a lot of talk. We had a discussion on one of the pods is how much more time does Steve Yzerman have left, right? And I don't know. I'm not going to say that maybe the season bought him a little bit more time, but it might have just bought him a bit more time to make a few more moves. But I mean, you're starting to see some of the pieces pan out, right? Because Raymond had a really good year last year, but he's kind of followed it up this year, right? So you see the consistency with him. Larkin looks pretty good as a whole. Plus, they have that.
I do like
decor.
Edvinsson and Seider too. Like they both obviously like. I don't think Seider's future is a power play one quarterback, but I think he's an overall really good, like a good defenseman. And Edvinsson, I'm such a fan of his. But I think again, compared to what it was at the beginning, yes, is there a trajectory or ceiling high right now? No. But again, compared to where it was, where everyone is asking questions about this entire team. And while there are some of those questions there, at least the performance is such where you can quell it a bit versus like full on fire sale and having to do this again. Right?
Well, also I was gonna say too with the Red Wings, they've actually like hit on a number of their first round picks, right? Because I think Marco Casper.
Well, they better because they're not hitting on their free agent selections.
Like for the brief stints they had him up on the first line in the first power play, he looked pretty good. He looks like a good pick there. Raymond again has finally shown some consistency with production. Larkin's one of the older. Ironically, he's one of the older guys on this, like older-ish guys on this team, and he looks like a number one center.
It's kind of tricky because like by the time the other guys become good, like maybe Larkin ages. Like they're a team I'd love to see take a swing on a guy like Elias Pettersson because it's like that's the like a team like this is the team that needs to make that kind of home run, go for it swing because they're too good to be a bottom 5 team right now.
But they're not good enough to be that elite team. Yeah, that's the problem. They're not gonna. And they're not in that tier with like Florida or like Tampa, right? So
and like those guys just don't become available, which is why I mentioned Rantanen too. Like I think they need to just take a swing on an elite player or take a guy like a JT Miller to them would have been interesting, right? Because again, it's a change of scenery guy you can take advantage of. Like again, I think Pettersson.
Well, I was gonna say their center depth is quite weak, right? Because after Larkin, it's JT Compher, who I'd be more preferable having him in a third line role. So, I mean, the issue is if you got a guy like JT Miller, who do you put as the second line center? But I think that's a good problem to have, right? It's a good. If we have Larkin as our second line center somehow, then
again, it's just one of those things where I think the ceiling, like I said, the ceiling of this team is definitely like lower. But at the end of the day, like. They should just be happy to be where they are right now, given how bad the original start was. Another team here is Minnesota. Look, with all the cap penalties they had, I thought this was not going to go well this year, similar to last year. They've just being ahead of Colorado at this point in the year with Kaprizov missing sizable chunks. Like, this is about as good as it can go. There are still issues with this team. There is a lack of any type of semblance of an offensive defensive play. But here's the thing, like Marco Rossi looks really he doesn't shoot, he's more of a play driver than like a guy who's gonna score, but he looks really good now that he seems fully healthy post-COVID. Joel Eriksson X easily one of the most underrated players in the league. And you still have Kaprizov, you still have Boldy. Like this is a nice roster. And Jesper Wallstedt hasn't even been called up yet, right? This is a nice roster. This is a team I thought would be a lot worse than they were, but here they are. Well,
we thought they might be headed towards the lottery, right? And I'm also gonna say too, their difference between their goals for and goals against is -2, and they're still holding on to third spot in their division. So I feel like you'd be knowing those stats, knowing that Kaprizov's been out, knowing that You have the cap penalty still. I think you're happy to even just be holding on to a playoff spot at this point. Will they make it far in the playoffs? Probably not, but I mean, it's much more preferable to be in the lottery.
They should be happy to be here because soon those cap penalties are going to be like Django and Che. Like, those shackles are coming off, and Bill Guerin can work his magic because Bill Guerin's low-key been one of the most underrated GMs in the league. And again, not my bias because I'm a Stars fan, but like he's been really good for them. And I'm curious to see what he does once these cap penalties are gone. With, again, a nice mix of like veteran talent and young talent, right? So,
for sure.
All right, and then the last team I have here that's happy to be here. It's my favorite story of the year so far, Columbus. Man, like
with what I think was what happened with them, right? What's happened to them the whole year? Obviously, with Gaudreau's tragic death, everything. Because I'll have a little anecdote on this one. I remember Monahan mentioned that he was excited to play with Gaudreau again, and it's quite sad that never actually happened again. And obviously, with Monahan having I don't want to say having a resurgence, but he's definitely like, you did not expect Monahan to have a point per game kind of season. Marchenko coming out of nowhere.
I'll be honest. I thought this team was going to be the worst team in the league. I'll admit I was wrong, but like
we were all wrong, right? We were all wrong,
like especially post rest in peace to Johnny Gaudreau. Like, I thought this team was going to be the worst team in the league. Like, this was a team that just lost its best player tragically, and the only signing at the time of note they made was Sean Monahan. And you're like, but I don't know if it's Dina Vason, I don't know if it's whatever it is, but like, so all of a sudden, those players you thought that were potential busts, like Ken Johnson, Cole Sillinger, they all have roles on this team and they look good. That Voronkov, Monahan, Marchenko line was elite from the year.
Well, I was going to say, Kirill Marchenko went from just a solid player to, I'm not going to say next superstar kind of level, but he's been an elite first line forward. I don't know where this has come from and how he's found it.
But nothing looks like unsustainable, which is crazy to say.
Well, also, if you're Columbus too, you're happy to be here too, just because if maybe you can just figure out the goaltending a bit, just maybe if you can eventually figure that out, you have all the offensive pieces in place. You have Werenski who's kind of refound his game, right? Still has his defensive lapses here and there, but it's been one of the best offensive D-men in the league.
To me, this is the best non-Stanley Cup contender situation in the league. Like, you think about it, they had to struggle they had to get exemption to get to the cap floor this year. So they have a ton of cap space to work with. You have young talent like Fantilli. Again, once Monahan went down, looks really good in a first-line role. You have Fantilli. You have Ken Johnson. You have Cole Sillinger. You have Marchenko. You have Voronkov. And when Monahan comes back, and Boone Jenner, now you have three really good centers down the middle. The defense needs work because it's basically Werenski and everyone else, but you have cap space and you have assets to trade to address that. And goaltending is one of those things where, again, like, you just need to be league average. I think, and you have Don Waddell, who's proven he can do it. Like, I think if I'm Columbus, man, if you make the playoffs and you just give a team, even if you get like lose 4-1 in the first round to, I don't know, Washington or like Florida, I'd still be happy, man. This is way more than anything I would have expected, especially after, again, the tragic passing of Johnny Gaudreau.
Well, I gotta say too, with the Blue Jackets, it's actually funny because we talk about all their offensive talent, but they still have Caden Lindstrom who's still coming up. Maybe you use him as a piece to help bolster your D-core. Maybe you use him as a piece to maybe try to help solidify the goaltending situation. You still have Denton Mateychuk, who you hope eventually becomes a good D-man for you. Maybe that helps kind of partially fix your defensive problems. So maybe there's still a lot more room to grow with this team.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I think when we talk about one of these pods will do best and worst team situations, I think they're easily like top 5 for me. I haven't looked at it beyond that, but yeah, absolutely.
Well, you also have the cap room. Maybe you take a swing on Mikko Rantanen. You take a swing on Mikko Rantanen, and suddenly you're even better.
No, they can take a swing on anybody. Like, whoever is available, they can take a swing on. Like, that's what's great about the situation they're in. Even if it's just like a really good second defenseman that can take on the second pairing, it's enough. Like, I don't know. I'm whether it's Evason, whether it's the team, but like whatever the combination is, I'm really proud of what the Blue. Like, I think they've been super impressive this year. Outer Circle team. Wait, do you have anyone else for happy to be here?
No. I mean, with the teams that are remaining, I don't think any of the other teams would be. It's not that. I mean, they wouldn't be happy. No, like they're fine with where they are, but they're not happy where they are, kind of thing.
All right, outer circle. So these are the teams like I don't think are elite. I don't think they're like I don't. If I'm being honest, I don't even think they're puncher's chance. But like they're firmly in the playoff spot, but they're just out of that section for me. Yeah, the first one's the Devils. No Jack Hughes. Like let's just call
That kind of killed their season. That killed any little hope they had left in their season.
And they were struggling for a bit even when he was there.
Even with Hughes, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Carolina, if they don't get this Rantanen Aho thing solved, there's a lot of underlying issues on this team. There's not a lot of scoring depth outside of their first line. The first line, while the advanced metrics have been good, the production hasn't been there. Unfortunately, there is the offensive
I think that's
production on the back.
That's been Carolina's problem overall, though.
Yeah,
that's been Carolina's problem overall. They've always had good metrics, but then they just never score. Like I don't know if you remember that series against Florida. That series against Florida kind of plays the microcosm of it was the cause of it all. You saw that they just got chances and chances, but they couldn't score. I mean, Carolina, I don't know. I'd almost
the analytics are good every year, but it's like at a certain point, you in the playoffs, you need that elite. Like the Oilers have proved, and the Avs to a lesser extent have proved this. Like at the end of the day, you need that elite driving talent, and like right now, it's just not. It's not there in abundance on this team. And outside of the first line, it's just there's again real lack of depth there. There's a real lack of playmaking and play driving from the back end. And I mean, Kochekov and Anderson are still question marks in different ways. Like this team's firmly in a playoff spot, but to me, I don't. If I'm being honest, I don't really take them seriously.
Well, I was gonna say even your high end forwards are struggling right now too. Aho. Svechnikov, Rantanen, even Jarvis to an extent has, been struggling, right? So it's like even your best guys aren't kind of carrying their weight. So if your best guys aren't carrying their weight, you're not going to get very far in the playoffs. And I speak as a fan of a team whose best guys don't usually perform in come playoff time.
And like you hope, and again, if Rantanen gets traded. I'd even put them in decidedly mid. Like that's how much Rantanen affects this rating for me, or the potential of Rantanen affects this rating for me.
I'm almost gonna say reality bites because low key like
they still have cap space, they have assets, and then they also have they still have guys like Nikishin and stuff like that. So I'm not like that.
I don't know. I'm not as high on their prospect pool that's left. And I feel like once you traded Natchez, who was a good player, you got Rantanen, and whatever you're getting back for Rantanen is probably not going to be very good, right? Reality is you're not going to get a good player that'll help you with your playoff push this year. Like no team's going to give you that realistically.
No, that's fair. All right, I don't have anyone else here. The next, don't want to bet against you. These are my puncher's chance teams. Look, there's something really good on paper, but like there's talent there. I wouldn't be surprised if they won, but there's something holding me back. The first one's Colorado. So again, they have the first line of Natchez, McKinnon, and like insert guy here, and they have Makar. And Blackwood's been pretty solid, but if you look at this team, the scoring depth on this team is so bad. They're playing Joel Kiviranta significant minutes, which is staggering to me.
Yeah, I saw that, and I was gonna say like I think Middlestat hasn't been too great for them. I mean, I don't know what's going on with the Avalanche this year. I know obviously I call it the cup tax. Obviously, when you win the cup and you have to pay your guys, things happen. But I think it's just some common. I think the issue's just mainly been. Drouin's been hurt a lot. Nichushkin can't apparently stay off whatever, drug habit he has. And then Ross Colton looked good in minutes, but he's not the kind of guy you want to keep in your top six,
well, I mean,
right?
Look at their centers, right? Like Middlestat's their second line guy. He's averaging 0.55 points per game. He's barely outscoring Devin Taves. Like that's their second line center. And then, like I said, Kiviranta's got significant run with them. Logan O'Connor, Miles Wood, guys like that have gotten who shouldn't, who have played for them at different points in their bottom nine, just haven't produced. Like it's kind of a weird mix. Like Parker Kelly's played for them. Like what? Why? Like, you know what I mean? It's
okay. I have a question. I have a question here. So obviously, we've been doing this pod for a little bit now. If I mentioned there's been a trade for the Avalanche, would that change where you have them right now, or do you think keep them in a similar spot.
Depends on the trade, always.
So I'll highlight now just briefly. We won't talk too much about this trade, but the Avalanche have acquired Brock Nelson Nelson and William.
And who's the other guy?
William Dufour, but that probably doesn't really matter.
I don't know who that is. Okay, might have to move them up here. Never mind. Okay, yeah.
I don't know if they're elite, but maybe I'll keep them at the top.
Who do they trade? Who do they trade back?
Here, let me pull it up 1 sec.
Trade?
No, I don't think so. Let me check again. I don't think so.
I don't know. If Middlestad's playing 3C and you have Jack Drury playing 4, that's pretty good.
So New York has retained half of Nelson's $6 million cap hit, and the Islanders are getting back Cal Ritchie, who's one of the Avalanche's top prospects, a conditional 2026 or 2027 first round pick, a conditional 2028 third, and then Oliver Shillington.
I'd have to put them in the elite, right? Like, Brock Nelson's good.
My problem with them is I feel like they're still missing the wingers are still a little bit questionable to me.
We can leave them here for now. That's fine.
I'll leave them at the top of don't want to.
I definitely don't want to bet against them because at the end of the day, they have Blackwood, they have Makar, and they have that first line. And the Oilers have shown you like one elite first line, a defense, and a goalie that's playing well. And in Oilers' case, a goalie that's not even playing well is enough.
Yeah, goalie's not even playing well. Yeah, I was gonna say yeah.
All right, the second team I don't want to bet against. I hate putting the Capitals here because they've been so good, but like. I don't know how to explain it.
There's some question marks with them. Like I looked at their analytics and it's a little bit questionable. The analytics kind of show them as like a middling team, and I feel like they've been. I don't want to say they've been carried by good goaltending and their first line producing and a couple guys having bounce back years, but that kind of feels like what's happened with the Capitals, right? Carbery's been a good coach. He's kind of squeezed the juice, like he's squeezed every possible ounce of juice out of literally everyone on this team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough for me. I have them here. I think they're obviously gonna coast in the regular season right now. This is kind of a predictive one. I just see them winning in the first round, and then if they have to run into one of those Atlantic teams, I just don't see it. But again, I don't want to bet against this team, but there's one, it's the lack of pedigree on this playoff pedigree with this team, and two, yeah, like you mentioned, the analytics tell me that like. This team's way outperforming it, and maybe at some point, even if it regresses, like teams that tend to outperform their analytics substantially, when they face elite talent in a 7-game series, that regression kind of hits a bit fast.
Well, I was going to say, the elite talent usually wins out. And I was also going to say, too, for the Capitals, I almost had them in happy to be here, mainly because what happened, like if you looked at last year and you saw that they made the playoffs with like a negative like 30 goal differential and they got their ass kicked.
We kind of thought this was just going to be the Alex Ovechkin like break Wayne Gretzky's goal record, and like that would be the thing to look forward to on this team. But like that's not it's not the case, right? Like they're a competitive team as well while he's doing that, which is more than optimal. But like either way, I think with this team, it's, I don't want to bet against them because I think they've been such a good story. And, like, honestly, the goal differential has been good. They've been a good team, but it's just, like, there's something holding me back.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the rest, like, they have a couple players that are aging, and, like, for example, Carlson's not as good as he used to be. So that's, like, mainly one. Ovechkin, obviously, while he's still scoring goals, he's obviously slowed down. And they don't really have any... like other marquee pieces. So, I mean, this team is good. Don't get me wrong. It's a good team. You have Thompson's been really, really good this year as your like 1A goalie. It just feels like you said, it feels like they're missing something. I just don't know what it is. I can't quite grasp or explain to you what it feels like they're missing.
So, yeah, but you agree with me that you have them here too?
I'll keep them here. I think the other option, if you could put them in happy to be here only because of if you thought about last year and where they are now. I think that's fair.
That's fair. All right. The other team I have here, it's tough. It's between one of two. So, like, to me, the Leafs are the better team than this other team. But like, it's the playoff history and the path versus like the Oilers, where like again they faced the Kings round 1 cakewalk, and then like they get to go through most of the Pacific. But the issue is like, I don't think the Oilers roster is as good because of Skinner and Picard. So
I think maybe you have them both in this tier. You have both of them and don't want to bet against you.
Okay,
but
that's fine.
Because I think that's a fair compromise. Because realistically, I don't think either team. Look, I'm a Leafs fan. I love to say they're elite, but they have some problems. Like they don't have a power play quarterback. and that's
This
their
is their
biggest
best
problem right now.
chance, I think, to make the cup final like this year because the goaltending's good. Tanev's added a lot on the defensive side, and you have guys who have played really well and outperformed their like Matthew Nyes, for example. But the path for this team is going to be brutal.
It's going to be one of the
unless
most
they
brutal
get the
paths,
1
right?
seed.
Even getting
They're
the
gonna-
1 seed though, you have to go through one of Tampa or Florida at some point.
But if you get the 2 or 3, you have to go through both.
Yeah, I know, but I think the problem is like it's regardless. Again, when you're going against teams such as Tampa or Florida, it really I don't want to. It's not a toss up, but it's a tough battle.
Like,
And you have
it
to the fact you have to go through
sucks
one.
One of Florida, Toronto, or Tampa is going to be bounced round 1, and to me, those are honestly those are the 3 best teams in the East for me. Like, and it sucks because one of them is going to be bounced out. But yeah, Toronto, it's the playoff pedigree. It's the lack of like offensive driver on the like Riley's just hasn't been it, and they've been really hesitant to throw OEL to be that guy. That's my only knock up, but I do like the goaltending. The Oilers is the opposite. Like, I hate their goaltending, but all the metrics and the way they play tell you they suppress shots pretty well. Yes, Bouchard and Nurse have their gaffes, and like when they brain fart, it is horrible. But overall, like the team does play pretty well defensively. The other thing too is again you have McDavid and Draisaitl who just go supernova in the playoffs like every time it seems, right? And like you have those two. So I want to put them in the elite, but Skinner and Picard just and again
single-handedly pull them out. Single-handedly pull them out of the elite category. And then to add another comment, I'll add another comment about the Leafs specifically. They even with Tanev being added to their team, I think they still on the defensive side do allow a high number of like chances to the opposition. And I think obviously this year they have Stolars and Wool to kind of to bail them out because in previous years, for example. Yeah. In previous years, they had Samsonov, who had the one good year and then the one horrific year. And then I think you saw in the playoffs last year, Samsonov was horrible. Wool came in for those 2-3 games, gave them a chance. And then when he got hurt, every Leafs fan kind of had a heart attack after finding out Samsonov was going to start Game 7. But, I mean, I think, again, the Leafs' 2 biggest problems, can they find a power play quarterback? And can they maybe add a little bit more depth and maybe they can slightly improve their defensive play kind of thing? Yeah. Is the other thing. And then with the Oilers, can they find a goalie that's better than Skinner? Yeah, find a goalie that's better than Skinner. If they can, then they get propelled into the elite category.
Also, the other low-key thing with the Oilers, the bottom 6 has been bad like this year. Like scoring-wise. And
I will say you can kind of get away with that
you can patch that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can patch that and you can get away with that in the playoffs if your best players produce. And unlike
they do.
Unlike the Leafs, the Oilers' best players always show up in the playoffs.
Just as a Stars fan, just so unfair. Like it's so, it's like, oh no, we're struggling. Hit the McDrive button. Like it's
or it's like, okay, we have them on separate lines. Yeah, we'll play them one shift together.
The scariest thing in hockey sometimes is the Oilers with the 2-goal lead because like when you have to start playing less of a defensive structure and then you start chasing them, that they'll just eat you alive. But luckily, if you're facing the Oilers, sometimes Skinner will let in 2 bad goals early and you'll be up 2-0. So there's that.
But then somehow the Oilers will randomly find a way to come back because McDavid and Draisaitl can just do things that nobody else can apparently. So
yeah, 100%. So the elite. These are like my 5 like cup contenders. I'll say this, if Dallas doesn't have Heiskanen for the playoffs, you can have them and don't want to bet against you. But look, I don't want to be biased, knock on wood, because I'm a Stars fan, but like this is a really deep team when Heiskanen's healthy.
They can roll lines 1-4. Like I hate to say this, but lines 1-4 against any other team's lines 1-4. Like I'm perfectly okay against it. The only line maybe I'd be scared of is probably like Colorado's first line and maybe Edmonton's first line. But every other line, I can throw any of Dallas' lines out there. And it's a frightening
mix of guys who like can score and also are capable defensive players. Like Hintz, like Duchesne's been really good for them. I mean, and this is without Seguin too. Like, and then if Heiskanen comes back, you have Heiskanen, Harley as your 1-2, who's a really good deep pairing. And Ottinger, like yes, he's inconsistent at times, but the thing with his inconsistency is the floor of his inconsistency is a bit higher than a lot of other goalies, so you kind of live with it. And they've rebounded from a really shaky offensive start. like Johnston, Robertson, Hintz have all started to really pick it up. The power play is not as like I was on the spot saying fire Steve's spot, and at least the power play seems to have turned around. It's a really good team, and there's still upside on this team when you talk about Johnston, Stankoven, Bork. If Bichelle ends up making the bottom pairing, Harley, like it's a mix of vets and upside, and like.
Well, I was gonna say if
talent.
this team feels so unfair because you have so many young players on ELC deals that are like just playing a big role, right? It almost feels like you could maybe even package one or two of them and just get not a big name, but like a good veteran, or like maybe you could even get a bigger name to come back and like bolster the team further.
Style, but yeah, overall
it's not a style, but I think I think having the option to do that is kind of crazy. The fact you have the opportunity to do that is kind of crazy.
I'd like to see a trade for one, because Sagan's on LTIR. I'd love to see a trade for one more offensive D-man, like I said, a Vince Dunn, like a Brandon Montour, like somebody like that. But if they don't, I still think this team, if again, if Miro Heiskanen is healthy coming into the playoffs, I think this team is a knock on wood, a really good chance. The other team, Winnipeg, I know they're at the top of the league, but I think everyone still underrates this team. Like this team is good. I mean, I know it's.
Well, I was gonna say they have the best goalie in the league, and their offense has been pretty freaking good. So
also, like Scarter Neal's made them play it. It's weird. He took the same roster and made them play a different way. Like they're better defensively, and obviously Hellebuck, helps a lot, right? Because there's certain things you can do when you have Hellebuck.
Well, also it hasn't been like in years past. Remember, years past they used to leave Hellebuck out to dry. They just left him, and he would just bailed him out. I think now they've kind of figured that out. Plus, I was gonna say their first line is one of the better first lines in hockey, and I think like Velarde kind of finding his game and kind of taking that next step has really helped, right?
Well, also I think Morrissey taking that next step from where he was like 2-3 years ago to like now where you're talking about a guy who's in Norris conversations like the last 2 years, and he's going to be in it this year, probably in the top 5 for sure. But I like this team. Like I think this team's really good, and people who are basing their their analysis of Winnipeg based on the last couple of years, like I think you're almost doing a disservice to how good this team is this year.
I feel like the only thing with Winnipeg is maybe I'd like to see them bolster their second line a little bit more. Second line. I'd also like forwards, a third
defenseman, but
yeah. But I think the second line forward, if you could maybe get like a better center, like a second line center, I think it's even better because I don't really like Nemeth Stankonoff in that role. Ehlers is a great second line forward. He's perfectly good there. And then like Perfetti's young, so you just let him kind of grow into that role. Maybe if you find a second line center, you're good, and then add another D-man. But I mean, this team has all the pieces, and you have the goaltending, which is usually the hardest part to figure out.
Like you're talking about a team that's like one of the top goal scoring teams in the league. And like, here's the thing. I know I don't like using analytics as the answer to everything, but like this team's surprisingly good defensively for a team that wasn't like that before. The offensive underlying metrics aren't the greatest, but like this team, like generally teams that are pretty good defensively and are at least league average offensively analytics tend to be good. And then combine that with Hellebuck, right? Like Hellebuck's the one, like everyone talks about outperforming PDO. The Jets do it consistently because Hellebuck's so good, right? And I don't know. I think like this team, you talk about, they could maybe use another second or third line guy, but I think this team is really good, and this team's going to be a tough out for anybody because you're starting off with, again, I think elite production from a number one D-man. You have a good second guy in Pionk. You have Helly. You have one of the best first lines in the league. Like, I think, there's no way I could put this team lower than the elite. I don't think they're the best team in the league, but I definitely think they're a contender.
I mean, they're top 5 for sure. So,
yeah.
So keep them in the lead for sure.
3, I have Vegas. I have Vegas is just solid. Like, it's weird. They're solid, but not spectacular in like every facet, if that makes sense.
So Vegas, I was a little bit iffy on just because with the Theodore injury that it kind of throws a wrinkle into everything. So for Vegas, I'm tempted to move them and don't want to bet against you. But again, I think it's the same thing as with you with the Stars and Heiskanen, right? If Theodore's there,
if he's back for the playoffs, I have them here because the defensive depth is just what, like if Theodore's healthy, Theodore, Hannafin,
Pietrangelo, Theodore. Yeah,
like,
it's crazy.
and their forward depth is, and they make like these random guys play well, like Dorofeyev,
Olofsson,
like Barbashev. Like it's crazy to me how they just find these guys who can outperform, and like they're easily there for me. I think I have a couple more questions with them compared to some of the other teams in this tier because again the offensive, like the star power isn't there, but
they've also had cup success previously, so that's why I don't really have to question them too much, because you get more leeway when you've actually had that success and you've actually won a cup.
A healthy Vegas has consistently been at least at worst a second round playoff team, right? Like
no questions there for them really.
Okay, so here's my hot take: the two best teams in the NHL to me are in Florida. To me, Florida, the Panthers or the Lightning could be 1 and 2 in the league right now. I don't like. You could give the edge to Florida for their offensive depth.
I'd also give the edge to Florida because they actually have the cup. But
I was going to say you could also give the edge to the Lightning because of the way Vasilevsky is playing right now. So like you could go either way. I'm fine. So let's start with Tampa. Adding Bjorkstrand and Gord. Now you have 3 like the center depth is good on this team. The top 6 is great.
You fixed your depth scoring, yeah.
The only holdback, I think the only reason I'd have them maybe below Florida is because 1, their offensive depth isn't as good. 2, the defensive depth isn't as good. After Hedman, there's a really stark fall off on this team. Moser's fine, but he's not what he should be yet. And then it's just really
Chernak's fine, and then McDonough. I feel like McDonough, Radish, and this Lilberg guy just really don't move the needle for me.
But what keeps them there for me is, again, it's the 3. It's now adding Gord, adding Bjorkstrand, having that depth, and then having a healthy Hedman and Vasilevsky playing the way he is. I think to me, it's like that's just everything you need to go on a deep run. And they have the perfect mix of defensive and offensive forwards. Like Sorelli and Hagel are both insane on the penalty kill, and they're arguably 2 of the top 8 defensive forwards in the league. Again, you have Kucherov, you have Point. Sorelli can also score. Sorelli and Hagel can score as well, so just throw that in there. Hedman's just Hedman. What more can you say?
Apparently, he doesn't seem to be slowing down despite continually getting older and older. He still is the same good old defenseman that we've seen.
And then, to me, Florida, there's nothing that Florida, if you watch Florida play, I don't know how to explain it. They have that, if you ever watch a really good team against a really bad team, you'll notice early, they can play a style that can just wipe you out within the first, 15, 20 minutes. You just know, oh, shit. And that's what Florida does.
I was gonna say, you remember that Calgary Florida game that we were watching at Montana? That was kind of I think that's the perfect game to sum
they have
that
such
point
an
up, right?
Sometimes against some teams will put out such an aggressive forecheck, and they're so good at making sure you can't gain zone entry, and it's up and down the roster. Like I said, Reinhardt's going to be a Selke finalist. Barkov's Barkov when it comes to defense. A lot of their other forwards too can play it capable. Lundell's a really good defensive player. They have scoring. They have young guys stepping up. Samasevich has been unbelievable for them. And then their defense too, right? Don't get me wrong. They don't have the elite scorer on defense, but they have a lot of depth. And my only question for them is this Bobrovsky, is the Bobrovsky in the regular season the Bobrovsky we're getting in the playoffs? Because that might be that might rear its ugly head against a team like Tampa or Toronto, who has had really good goaltending this year. But overall, I just think Florida's the best team, in the Florida or Tampa, like I said. But Florida probably has the best forward and combined forwards, I would say. Tampa has the better goaltending, and it just comes down to do you like Hedman plus everybody else, or do you like we don't maybe have an elite first pairing guy, but we have a bunch of second pairing guys through the roster? And that's kind of how I feel. But I think, Tampa, Florida to me are the 2 best teams in the league right now. And it sucks because they might play round 1.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's gonna suck if they have to. It's gonna suck if they're the 2-3. Well, it's gonna suck either way because it's either the Leafs. It's gonna be the Leafs, the Lightning or the Panthers, and they're going to be 1, 2, 3 in some order, and two of them are going to have to play each other in the first round.
We need to change that system. But yeah, like this is the way I think the contenders for this year. Like I said, Colorado, you could move up for me. Edmonton, like the ones I don't want to bet against you, like those could easily move up depending. I think everything else kind of feels set in stone for me.
I think it also depends on what trades happen tomorrow too, right? Because if some more trades happen, I think some of those teams that don't want to bet against you will move up.
Yeah,
like if you're the Leafs and you get a power play specialist defenseman, or you bring back more defensive depth, to maybe you limit more chances even now. I think maybe you can move them into the elite. If you're the Oilers, maybe if you get, I'm not gonna say if you get like John Gibbs or something, but if you get a better goaltender than Skinner, I could easily move you up to the
overall,
elite.
I think this year it's those 9 teams. Like for me, Washington probably on the lower end of those 9 teams, but like those 9 teams for me are like those are the contenders to an extent, and then again among those, like it could really go either way. It just sucks because we're going to see some insane. Like there's going to potentially be like Winnipeg, Colorado round one is a possibility. Colorado, Dallas round 1 is a possibility. Colorado, Edmonton, Colorado, Vegas is a possibility. Like there's gonna be some potentially crazy matchups round 1, where like some really good team is going home.
Like I think, like you said, we need to go back to the 1v8, 2v7, 3v6, and 4v5 system.
100%. Was there any other objections you had with anything? Or does that seem fine?
No, I think this is good. I'm actually fine with it.
On Florida and Tampa potentially being the 2 best teams in the league, or
yeah, I think for sure. I mean, Florida won the Cup last year, and they've also they're continuing to add to a team that was already like one of the best teams in the league, right? And Tampa made significant additions. And I mean, when you have Vasilevsky playing the way he is, you can never count Tampa out. Like you can't count them out just with him around.
Mm-hmm. All right, so those are our power rankings for the year. Maybe we do one going into the playoffs, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know how much this changes. Well, again, maybe acquisitions, so we might. But yeah, these are our power rankings so far. We'll see how they change maybe going into the playoffs.
Yep, and I think with the playoff one's going to be a little bit shorter because we're going to be down to I think
we're going to cut
16.
off yeah.
We're going to cut off probably somewhere around here in the tier list. We're going to cut off right around there or something. I don't know.
Although we have to technically probably put LA in one of those and the Rangers in possible. Yeah.
Oh geez, I'm not going to be happy to do that.
All right, moving on to our last segment of the day. Guess that player. This time it's my turn. I have to pick a player for you, which I did. It's kind of interesting because, so I'm just going to give you a hint. This player was part of a trade, again. I keep picking players from trades for some reason, who weirdly helped shape, the player he was traded for ended up impacting, 3 different arcs for 3 different teams, which is kind of really, or he was involved, impactful for 3 different teams in kind of funny ways. So here, let me, but again, he wasn't the player itself. He was a player He was a player in that trade. So let me pull this up here. 1 second. I think my biggest fear with these is always I
accidentally leaking a name. Yeah, we'll do it next. We'll do the segment next week instead.
All right. So again, for people that don't know, this is our segment. It's like the equivalent of Guess That Pokemon. It's Guess That Player, where we basically select a player. Sometimes we use context of our podcast, and you have 3 guesses to guess who that player is. 3 points if you get it without any help whatsoever. 2 points if you use 1 hint. 1 point if you use 2 hints. 0 if you get it incorrectly. The 2 hints are either where that player was, what round that player was drafted, if they were drafted, and where they were.
Where were they born? Yeah, where they born? Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's see it. Do you have the play ready?
So 1 second here. I'm just gonna pull this up. There's also there's a funny thing with this player too, which is also one of my favorite moments. 1 second.
Okay, let's see it. I'm kind of curious.
Okay. Let me share. Is it present? No screen. Wait 1 second. Okay.
Make sure you have the right tab. Don't share one of the tabs you don't want to share. That tease you. If you have any funny on your screen. Oh no.
Okay. I think I got it. All right.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, so this guy last played in the league in 2016, 2017. He's a defenseman. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to look at the stats a bit more. So he didn't really produce a ton of points. Not a big point producer, but he had a couple of decent years. Let's think here. Ooh, I'm trying to blank. Let's see. So he came into the league at 22, which either tells me he was probably drafted. I'm gonna guess probably like 03, 02 is probably my guess. That's my unless he's one of those guys because this is back in a time frame where people used to get like you remember when players used to get drafted at like age 22 or like age 23.
Yeah,
and it was like one of the weirdest like things. So let me see here. Boston, okay. And you said that he's got traded for a guy who impacted 3 different arcs.
Yeah.
And the problem is with those arcs, I don't know if that's a good thing or if that's a bad thing. Because with those guys, I think, defensemen. Man, defensemen are always tricky. Okay, so Norris was an all-star once. So he was an all-star that year with the Capitals, and then he went to the Flames. Oh, so he went to the Flames during that lockout year. Okay. Man, this is not helping at all. I'm trying to think of names, but I'm not hitting any names. 33, so he wasn't super old when I'm assuming he retired in 2016, 2017, or he retired after I guess he wasn't good enough to get another like job in the NHL. Okay, I might have to take the first hint.
There's a funny story for that one. Okay, so
I'll take the first hint.
Do you want the draft or the?
Let's go with the where they're born.
Okay, where he was born. So born in Kitchener, Ontario.
Kitchener, ooh.
So it's not European. Which honestly, like, kind of helps a little bit because it's not like Boston had a lot of European defensemen at times. So
now I'm just blanking because it's like I'm trying to think who's played for some of these teams, but there's not a lot of names that come to mind. Let me think. Okay, so who's played with the Capitals and the Blues? That's the one I'm trying. That's the link I'm having the most trouble figuring out because Boston always had a bunch of like random defensemen.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Let me think. Oh, you know what? Now that you said something funny happened in his career, there's only one. There's one thing I can think of, and I could be. Okay, I think this might be the guy. I might have the name in mind now.
Do you want another hint or?
No, I don't. I think I can get it without the hint. So the thing I'm thinking of is I'm assuming this player. You don't confirm. Obviously, you can't confirm this, but I have a feeling something fishy happened with an official or something. That's the thing I'm getting with because I remember this happened when they were with Calgary, and he has played for a bunch of. He has played. I think now that I think about it, he has played for some of the teams that are. He's traded for players. But I can't remember which players he was traded for that. Impacted 3 different arcs. Who is he involved in trades with? Okay, I'm just gonna guess the player. Is it Dennis Weidman?
Final answer.
Or final answer. I think that's his name. I hope I got the first name and last name right.
You are correct. It is Dennis Weidman. So
yeah, because you said something funny, and that's when it clicks. So I remember the official thing.
His career ended not because of his own like he wasn't bad. I think it's because of he plowed into the referee after he got hit. Right.
Yeah, I remember that now.
So,
but I can't remember who he got traded for though. That
so here's the thing. So the player he got traded for that affected 3 different arcs. He got traded for Nathan Horton. So here's the arc, right? Nathan Thornton goes to Boston. He's one of their best players at the time. They go to the cup final. Aaron Rome basically ends his career, right?
Yeah.
Boston wins the cup. Basically, Boston's down 2-0. That was a big rallying cry for them. They win the cup. Affects their arc. It affects Vancouver because they were never the same after that season, right? That was the peak of the Sedin era. And then he was also fun. I also say he affects the Leafs because he was the reason they got
David
rid of
Clarkson.
Clarkson.
Clarkson, yeah, okay. I was thinking that. I was like, okay, Clarkson. As soon as you said Nathan Horton, I recognized the Clarkson thing.
So the trade was the Bruins got Gregory Campbell and Nathan Horton, and the Panthers got Wideman, a 2010 first and a 2010 third. So
Campbell was actually a pretty. He wasn't a key contributor on that Bruins team, but he was like a good bottom six player for them. And I don't know if I don't know if it was that year, but I remember there was one year where I think he blocked a. Was it one year where he blocked a Malkin slap shot, broke his leg, and just kind of limped around on the penalty kill? I remember that. That's the clip I remember most about Gregory Campbell.
But Horton also that year before Rome just took his soul was like. I think he was top 3 on the Bruins in scoring in the regular season that year, if I remember correctly. Like he was really.
I'm not surprised, mainly because I always keep forgetting this, but apparently I keep forgetting that Horton was like was the top 3 pick. I think he was a 3rd overall by the Panthers. I think I could be wrong about that, but he was not a lottery pick, but he was like basically a top 5 pick, and I always forget that because you never if I told you Nathan Horton, you wouldn't guess that he was a top 5 pick, right?
And honestly, like Wideman was solid. Like he was never like, no offense, if we did Norris players for all of these, like we'd get them, right? But like he was never like he was a good, like sometimes first pairing, mostly second pairing player. Like again, his career ended because of one of the funniest things I've ever seen on the ice. His career.
Wasn't that the one where he claimed he was concussed and like, but then like it looks like he literally just nailed him. Like
my favorite moments. But yeah, no.
So when you watch the clip, the first thing you'll notice I remember he's like skating with his head down, so he looks like he's done. Suddenly, when he's right in front of the ref, he looks up and just lines the ref up. So that's why I never bought the whole concussion thing. But yeah,
I like it's funny because it's these little trades that end up affecting, and that it's kind of a greater conversation of like what happens in the league sometimes, right? Some of these trades that we talk about might have wide-ranging impacts. And it's not just the big ones like the Rantanen trade. It might be one of these smaller ones. Like it could be the Bjork... Well, I don't want to call it a small trade per se. But it could be like Granlund and Ceci to Dallas. It could be, one of these ones we might see on Friday. It could be Wallman to the Oilers. Like we really don't know. And there could be lasting impacts, right? So...
Yep.
All right. I think that's all we got for this podcast. Anything else before we wrap up? Or
nope. I think maybe in the next podcast we have some storylines we want to talk about, but we'll probably talk about a few more trades. I'm assuming the Brock Nelson one probably gets talked about because that's one that happened literally during the pod. I think I literally saw it on my when I was. It's funny because I was googling Colorado's lines when we were discussing like where we want to put the Avalanche on the tier list, and I just saw Brock Nelson's jersey
on daily face
in the second line. I was like, wait, what the fuck? I'm like, when did this happen? Because I thought I would have maybe gotten a notification or something, but I googled it and I was like, oh well, got traded. That's why I cut you off there.
But yeah, no, that's fine. It's gonna be interesting. I also want to do at some point, like, I think it's a good time to do the 5 best and worst team situations. I think it's an interesting thing to do, which is weird because it paints an idea of how quick, like, I would have had Columbus as one of the worst situations, and this year I'd probably have. And
now they've gone to one of the best, right? Yeah. They've suddenly been one of the best, and you're like, what the fuck?
Crazy how things can change. Again, appreciate you guys tuning in. I think we covered things in pretty good detail. Again, I'm SJ. That's WillyDubz. We're here at Tome the Crease, and we're signing out. Later.
All right. Peace, guys. Later.